Shalom. Welcome, beloved, to Grace and Truth Ministries on the Mr. Black Taster channel. I am Brother Isaiah, also known as Yeshaya. I'm a born-again believer who follows Adonai Yeshua Mashiach, also known as the Lord Jesus Christ. I believe Almighty Yahweh is gathering a remnant of scattered Israel as dry bones in a valley as part of the promise seed of faith. I believe this gathering is about salvation in Yeshua to bring together Jew and Gentile believers as one in Christ to fulfill Scripture before the imminent return of Christ to reign on earth and before the final judgment. I do not tolerate racism, bigotry, anti-Semitism, or racial supremacy doctrines of any kind, and those attitudes are not welcome here. It is my sincere prayer that through the ministry of the Scriptures by the Holy Spirit, I may serve my generation as a prophetic voice to awaken Israel and all in need of salvation through the gospel of Yeshua Mashiach. On this platform, I will be teaching or discussing scripture, history, and other relevant issues. I pray you receive insight, inspiration, and faith by the word of Yahweh in the name of Adonai Yeshua HaMashiach. All right, so shalom and blessings to those of you that have gathered with us. I see some wonderful people that have gathered in the chat already. Sister Shirley Greer, blessings to you, beloved. Good to see you, Sister Denise Jones. Blessings to you, beloved. My dearly beloved Sister Regina, blessings to you, beloved. Good to see you. All right. Somebody said the music is still playing. Man, you know what? So I'm talking to a soundtrack. Did y'all hear everything I said, though? Or did y'all hear what I said? Or was I was talking to us for some reason on my end? I guess my speaker on this end. Let me try something one time. Because my speakers, I can't hear mine. I should be able to hear something. Let me try something. Yeah, okay, I just heard on the other monitor. So I was talking to a soundtrack, but could y'all still hear me clearly? Okay, no, wait, I just turned the music off. Lord. All right, can y'all hear me now? Turn the music off. Couldn't turn the music off. The music was too loud. Good Lord. Talk about difficulties, man. Technical difficulties. And I was the difficulty that was causing all the technical issues, it would seem. Okay. So thank you all. And my distinguished panelists and you all have gotten me to turn the music off, which I forgot was still in the loop function. All right, playing. So, so now that the music is off, and I read through this whole thing like I normally do, and said all of that. So I'm not going to do it again. Y'all already know what I say, and everybody else does too. So I'm just going to say blah 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 blah. Adonai Yeshua HaMashiach. See, I went through the whole thing. So welcome. All right, to Mr. Blacktastic channel. Okay, so we are here, and it is what it is. All righty. You know, that was a serious brain fart. So without further ado and delay, since I've already messed up the intro, we just get right into it. So this is part 2 of the myth of Sub-Saharan Africa. All righty. And so I have here with me my distinguished guest and brethren, my brother Errol Spike, who
Shalom,
is
family.
with me. Hey, man, what's going on with you, brother?
Not too much. Just glad, happy to be back. Happy to be able to, talk to the people again.
Man, glad to have you with us, man. It's a good day to be in the land of the living. We still got more work to do for the Most High, man.
Amen.
All right. And my brother in the trenches as well. All right. My brother Tyvon Swain, my man, the Orthodox Moor. Shalom, brother. What's going on?
Hello, fam. Appreciate you for having me back.
Man, glad to have you in here with us, man. And we got no other than the brother last week, man. He came under fire, man. You know, the natural disasters were after him. They were trying to get him in Kansas. They tried to sweep him and Toto away, but he fought through it. He fought through it and he came out strong. He clicked his heels together. And so now he's with us. And that's none other than my man, Ephraim, the Hebrew of Israel.
Shalom, y'all. Shalom. Yeah, that storm was bad.
Hey, man, glad to see you, man. Glad to see you. So we are here, all right? And today, family, I will be primarily facilitating. And these brethren are going to be educating. So you're going to get a great dose of information. I have some questions here that have come in that we're going to ask these brethren, and they're going to be able to answer it during the course of the presentation. And so we're going to get right into it. So just by way of by small review, we'll just hit real quick some of the things we talked about in the last time, and I'm going to show y'all some different maps from that time as well. And if you brothers see anything you want to chime in, go ahead. But the 4 questions that we asked and answered the last time we were here was, what does sub-Saharan mean and where did it come from? So we learned that the term sub-Saharan is actually a racial trope. There is no such thing as sub-Saharan in the African mind, so to speak. This was a created term by Europeans in around the 18th century to try to separate North Africa from the west of Africa. And then we see it was kind of used arbitrarily, depending on what nations in Africa they felt were sub-Saharan based on whether or not they were under European domination or rule, as was the case with South Africa, which is clearly what you would consider sub-Saharan at the very bottom of the continent. But once Nelson Mandela became president, it lost it lost that classification and then became sub-Saharan, or reclassified rather as sub-Saharan. And we even see that such eastern nations like Somalia and Djibouti are classified as being in the Middle East, even though they're also clearly on the African continent, and their neighbors right there with Kenya and Ethiopia and things of this sort. And so we see that it has more of a political meaning or ideology behind it that's not accurate historically. All right. And then we also see that there were countries, because the Saharan Desert is the largest desert on the earth, that border the Sahara Desert both to the north and the south. And the ones that border it or are half of it in the south, such as Mali and Niger and other countries, they aren't considered well, it's interesting. I'll say they are considered sub-Saharan, but they're just as much, I guess, has just as much of the Saharan Desert in them as the northern ones, but yet and still, because of where they're located, they're sub-Saharan, so to speak. And then we had the question of, does the idea of sub-Saharan Africa exist in antiquity among Africans? And we found out, no, it does not. All right. Number three, the Hamitic hypothesis, which these gentlemen may go into deeper detail during this particular teaching. We talked about what that was, and that was the whole ideology based on the story of Ham's descendant Canaan being cursed and all of these different things. And it was a way for them, the Europeans, later on during colonization, to try to formulate the idea that the greatest, or what they deemed to be the greatest civilizations in Northern Africa, such as Egypt and Carthage and things of this sort, were attributed to what they called Caucasian Hamites. So basically, they were claiming all the glory and greatness that they felt was African as actually being created by white cultures. So it became a racial thing. Even though they said the people were Hamites, they said they were white Hamites, which was interesting in and of itself. And they started to also, from this, form other ideas that they stamped science on, saying that the black man's brain and head and all these other things was smaller and he was inferior to the white man. And you would see this filter into theology, where you had the Reverend Charles Colcock and others who would write theological books where they would call the black man a beast made in the image of his master, the white man, and things of this sort. So you would have those types of literature being produced. And then we talked about, how has this information shaped our theology and worldview? Well, we just kind of mentioned it, in that we've been very much racialized, because that's how we've been socialized. And I don't care how blackety black, pro-black you claim to be, you are still, in many ways, tainted by a racist ideology that has been introduced to the world. And even like, and I listen to people, especially in the Israelite community, who claim to be woke, so to speak, and say they're awakened, and they still make arguments that really have no substance, such as, well, the letter J is only 500 years old. And I'm like, well, it's not the only letter that's that old, but y'all don't ever say anything about that the other letters. You only talk about the letter J because you think the name Jesus, in particular, is European, yet you still use the letter J for James and John and all these other things. And then it's also led to even how we interpret languages, the desire to want to learn Hebrew, to where people just actually discard anything they think is of European origin. And basically what we've done in many ways is we've created, well, in this community, I've seen people do it, created a bastardized Ebonic style of Hebrew, and then people want to call it Paleo, and it's not Hebrew at all. And in fact, there's a lot of errors and things in it. And I see it, but I understand the psychology behind it is people trying to get back to their culture, but then trying to divorce what they feel is information they got from the dominant culture. And you have to be careful in doing that, because you'll throw out not only the bathwater, but the baby with it. And then you'll be starting over with things that won't build what you're trying to create, on a solid foundation. And so the assumption that everything white ain't right, just like they thought if you was black, you had to get back, is just as dangerous. Blackwashing is every bit as errant as whitewashing. And what we want to do is some God washing. We want some truth washing. We want to get it right, not just get it black or white. All right. And so, in saying all of that, the term sub Saharan, you're going to hear us use it during this lesson. And the reason why we're using it, even though we know that it's a racial trope, is because, again, we've been socialized a particular way. This word is now part of common thought and vocabulary. And we saw with the video I showed on last week that Dr. Kennedy had, when she did her Google search, she was like, the term doesn't become popular until 1978. Even though it did exist before that, but it doesn't really become popular in terms of its usage at an academic level until around 1978. That's when it becomes very prevalent. So it's even relatively new. But again, we've been socialized to it. We understand what it means. Don't get scared and afraid of words and all of a sudden decide I'm going to stop speaking or using these words or terms because other people did it or I think they created it. When you're doing everything else that other people did and created, you're not going to stop eating macaroni and cheese and using your internet and computer and all these other kind of things. Even some of the inventions that Black people are behind, a lot of the other technologies that you use to take advantage of those inventions were still created by Europeans or white people as you would have it, and you're not going to stop using them. So we got to be balanced, all right? Because racism is an evil from the devil. Men have created it out of their carnality, and it's infected the whole world worse than any pandemic that we've ever experienced because it's made people hate each other on the basis of something they can't control. You don't get to pick and choose before you arrive here what color or culture you're going to be born into or in. All right. You are who you are. You didn't get to choose your skin. And so you have to accept that this is how the Lord made you. And then your life's experiences and things are going to be built oftentimes around that because that's, again, how people are going to socialize you. But your skin is not your sin. And there's nothing that you need to make excuses for. Neither is it something that you need to promote over someone else because you look at them as inferior and believe yourself to be superior or vice versa. All right. You're not inferior because of it either. So we just have to accept that this is what it is. Because at a genetic level, which the brothers are going to bring out today, phenotype is almost non-existent when it comes to genotype. And like I said before, the geneticist that I'm working with and my family's working with, she don't even look at us as a skin color because she's just looking at the genetics. That's all she cares about is the genetics. And that's normally how a lot of geneticists are, even though there are some racists from our past, but now we have, I believe, a case in point, more honest geneticists. So with all of that being said, bring up some maps here. So this is a map of the Mediterranean world. As for the most part, we're familiar with it today in terms of the countries that border the Mediterranean Sea. And if you look there toward the bottom of the screen, you see Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, and Egypt as your northern African nations that border the Mediterranean Sea. And these nations would actually, from the European perspective, are not part of Africa, even though they're clearly on the African continent. All right. And then you see all the other nations that border. You have Israel over there, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, Cyprus, Turkey, Greece, Italy, France, Spain, Portugal, and so on and so forth. Now, here is a map. Let's go back in the history a little bit. Here is a map of Greek and Phoenician colonies in 550 BC. So we're talking about 2,500 years back. Now, why am I showing this map? I'm showing this map because in talking about sub-Saharan Africa, understand this, that the idea of a sub-Saharan Africa, again, is European. It's not African. It's not Asian. So in showing these maps, I want you to get a glimpse at, from the European perspective, this to them was the world for the most part. Even though they may have been aware of other nations further to the east, like China, because of the Silk Road and things of this sort, This area right here around the Mediterranean Sea, which in ancient times was called the Great Sea, this was for them the center of everything. So the most important events, in European history actually took place in this region, and even much of the Bible history took place in this region. And so this is how they viewed the world. So they really didn't have a reason to look at the world beyond the northern parts of Africa. And so this is what the areas that the Europeans traveled to and they colonized. You do have Roman expeditions that did go into or beyond the Sahara, a few that did, and there was even a brief skirmish or war with Ethiopia. That was about as far down the east of Africa that the Romans went. And just kind of with the Parthian Empire, which is a whole other empire beyond Iraq. And so they went to the limits that they could, but they couldn't conquer those people. So they stopped. And then here's another map of the Mediterranean world about 300 years later in about 218 BC. And here you're going to have some people groups and things on the map, also with some color codes here. You see Germanic tribes, Slavic tribes, Celtic tribes, Gallic tribes, Iberian tribes, Numidians, Thracians, Illyrians, and all of these other peoples that are here on the map. You even see some familiar biblical names, such as the Galatia, Pergamon, Thessalonica, those places, Antioch, Jerusalem. And, these places are interesting because some of them, like I said, are very prominent in scripture. There's Rome, all right? And then you see, Pergamon, and Thessalonica, Thessalonians, the books of Thessalonians that Paul wrote to that. And you have Pergamon, for instance, which is one of the 7 churches of Revelation that book is written to. And so you have these different places. Now, why, again, is this important? Because, again, for the European, especially for the Greek and the Roman and others, this was the world for them. All right. So this was the world for them for the most part. And this is the world that they influenced and affected the most. And even though Rome becomes the dominant power after the Greeks, the culture that did dominate most of this region or world was the Greek culture. So that means Greek science and history also dominated. And so you'll see a lot of information translated from Greeks into the Roman culture and so forth and so on, even though Africa in itself is not a Greek word, but it's a Roman word. The Greeks considered all Africans to be what they would call Ethiopians, and they actually called Africa in some places, depending on who you're getting your information from in Greece, either the whole continent was called Ethiopia, and the Ethiopians were all the people, which mean burnt skin or black skin, or to some extent, some of them, like Herodotus, called the continent actually Libya. All right, so you have these maps here. And then here's the Greek colonial world again to show you just where its main centers of influence was. And Egypt should be highlighted a little bit bigger. I mean, they got an entire city named after Alexander the Great called Alexandria. All right. But it just shows you how far wide their culture, their philosophy, and ideology spread, but it doesn't go below what we would call North Africa or into Sub-Saharan Africa as much. Because to Herodotus and ancient historians, well, there was nothing beyond the Sahara. And so you see how enclosed they were in terms of their view of the world. All right. And then we have this map here where we see Africa divided into 5 different sections: North Africa, West Africa, Middle and Eastern Africa, and also Southern Africa. The continent is huge. The continent of Europe fits into Africa, along with the subcontinent of India, as well as the nation of China, as well as the United States. So Africa is incredibly large. And it's a lot larger, perhaps, than what we realize. People think you just go from East to West Africa like you walking down the street. At least that's how we talk about it. And even for us as Black Americans, we tend to have a skewed idea of Africa as well as African countries. And we look at Africa continentally and not the way the African on the continent looks at it. It's a continent that consists of 54 different nations. Again, over 3,000 tribes that speak over 2,000 different languages. Here's the map of Africa we showed that shows how it was divided by European colonial powers. And you see that France and Britain seem to have the largest share of the continent in terms of the places or areas that they colonized and socialized. Because a lot of continental Africans speak English, and quite fluently, I might add. I was just talking to some in Uganda. All right. And then here's Africa today in its 54 countries and how it would look also. Now, that brings us to how, again, the European idea of Africa or their division of Africa, with sub-Saharan Africa being in the lime green on this particular map, and then North Africa, what they consider part of the Arab world, on this blue or dark blue portion. So you see there Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Libya, those areas are darked out. All right. Yet the countries below that, Chad, Niger, Mali, Mauritania, well, the Sahara Desert takes up just as much of their nations as it does the ones above them. All right. Here's another map that kind of blocks out that fills in some of Sudan. And I imagine that this happened for the same reason that South Africa was now put back into the sub-Saharan category. And that's because the Sudan now, which is divided into two countries, is under African or Black leadership now, or rulership and authority, and no longer subject to European colonial powers in terms of how they run their government, even though Europe still controls a lot of the economies in African nations. So you have that. And then that's going to bring us to this map. And this is where the brethren are going to come in, and I'm going to hand them the baton. We may get one more guest who may stop by and join us. All right. And I see some other beloved people that have already jumped into the chat with us. I see Sister Aruka. Bless you, beloved. Good to see you. I see my brother Sean Harris, man. What's up, man? You probably should be up here with us, man. I see also, who else I see in the Ashley Just Souls. What's going on? Ashley, my brother Ophizi in the building. All right. And my brother Kedrick is there. All right. And so if anyone else has joined us that I missed, please charge it to my head, not to my heart. I do have on glasses, but they don't give me superpowers. But this map right here is interesting. All right. And you see here in this particular map, it has the division of ethnic groups on the continent. So you see in the blue, they have what is characterized as Afro-Asiatic. Then you have the Nilo-Saharan. You have the Niger-Congo A group, the Niger-Congo B group, which they have in parentheses Bantu, where you see all that orange in Central and South Africa. In the middle of that, you have the Khoisan, and then you also have on Madagascar, the Austronesian. And so you see these arrows and different things which show migration patterns, is believed. And of course, the Sahara Desert, which is very prominent on the map, is outlined. And then you had the out of Africa hypothesis also listed here. It says about 160,000 years ago, or probably less than 3 million years ago. Now, for these brainy questions, I'm going to bring to the stage the brethren, and I'm going to let them take it from here. So let's do the intro to bring the brothers back.
I got a special treat for you this evening. A young man that you all know is Joe the Policeman from the What's Going Down episode of That's My Mama. I want you to put your hands together and welcome him to the stage. Big round of applause for Jackson Heights' own Mr. Randy.
So we're bringing Jackson Heights on. Randy Watson.
Yeah, shout out to Sexual Chocolate, you know what I'm saying?
Afro-Asiatic chocolate, y'all. Afro-Asiatic chocolate. Israel like Nestle. Bring them, come on, welcome to the stage. Welcome to the stage. Welcome to the stage. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you, sir.
Well, brothers.
That boy good.
I made the intro, so that boy, what you say? Ashley said that boy, yeah. So y'all down, man. So y'all now, I'm gonna let you gentlemen take it from here.
So who would like to go first?
I think it's you, Randy. Go
Well,
ahead.
you know what? I do have these questions. I guess that I could have gave y'all a better lead into that since we do have the questions. So that way y'all know which way to go with this. So you know, so the first question is, what is the out of Africa hypothesis? And all these questions will lead us into the next question. And y'all can take as little or as long time as you want to answer this, because I know the information you have is going to help us with these. It's just 4 questions, but I know these questions will be answered by you gentlemen. So, because somebody asked this question as well, what does this mean?
You want to take that one, Ibrahim?
Yeah, I can give my input, and I guess you can give yours. But basically, the out of Africa hypothesis is the belief that humans evolved and migrated out of Africa into the Middle East and eventually all throughout Eurasia. So basically, Africa is the birthplace of humanity. But like you said, it's a hypothesis. But yeah.
Okay, all right, brother Moore, did you have something to add to that?
No, that's a good breakdown.
All right, all right. So then, the second question: how long has continental Africa been inhabited? And this is a great question because I've heard, especially in the Israelite community, people try to use excerpts from the Apocrypha and other ideas that they don't have concrete evidence or credible evidence to try to say Africa was empty. So then this would kind of go back to the map that we showed earlier. So how long, or what's the estimate that how long has continental Africa been inhabited?
Hey, go ahead, Ibrahim. You got it.
By Homo sapiens sapien, it's been inhabited for the past 200,000 to 100,000 years. By Homo sapiens sapien.
Okay. So then the idea that people left the Levant and went to an empty continent, or Israelites at least left the Levant and went to an empty continent, it can't be substantiated by evidence, correct?
The Israelites from the Levant migrated into Africa.
Israelites, in other words, when the Israelite diaspora began to migrate into Africa, Africa itself as a continent wasn't empty. It was inhabited by people of other cultures and nations, correct?
Oh, correct, yes.
All right. All right. All right. And then a third question here is, and this is where we start to really get to the nitty gritty. What is your estimation of ancient European knowledge on ancient Africa? Because in the first part, and like I said, I'm just getting these questions out the way, and then you guys can go ahead, like I said, and go with what you have. So we understand that Herodotus, he did the best job he could from the position that he was in, as did others like I think Diodorus and different ones. But it doesn't seem like their information went beyond the Saharan. And it seems like what they didn't investigate themselves, like they did with Egypt and other places, they kind of assumed or made it up and just left it blank or left it to assumption. Would how many others do you think did this as well? Because it doesn't seem like Europeans as a whole did a lot of investigation until much later, after there had already been thriving empires and civilizations on the continent below the Sahara Desert.
I think I can try to field that one. So we're talking maybe approximately, like I said, you talking about Herodotus. So we're talking maybe about between 2,500 to 2,300 years is the most. It's like when you get an inkling of European culture, especially specifically a Southern European culture, looking at ancient Africa. If you look back on the maps, you can see how close Greece was, like I said, basically to North Africa, like Carthage, Tunisia, in those areas. So you say about 25 to 2,300 years. But before that, Europe was still mostly like an agricultural hunter-gatherer culture. And that, so it wasn't a lot of anybody trying to go down and say, hey, what's going on south of us? Not everyone thinking about that, because there was a lot of infighting, between different tribes over the resources in that area.
Okay. I'm trying to make sure my sound on my end is good, because I could hear what you were saying, but some of the parts were going out. Could everybody else hear them clearly?
Yeah, I heard them just fine.
Okay, so maybe it was just me. Okay, so you saying that we got so their knowledge of ancient Africa seemed to be pretty shallow then, from what you're saying, Arrow Spike. And as the lady said, I guess in the presentations last week, was that there were civilizations that were already thriving with paved streets and walls and other things for like 1,000 years before Europe.
Absolutely.
European civilization started to rise to prominence, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, now that in and of itself is amazing, because you also have a similar scenario in Mesopotamia, where you had thriving civilizations, for even what appears to be perhaps even longer before you start to see European civilizations rise. All right, now this is definitely an orthodox moral question. So at this point, I'm gonna ask this question, man, and you guys got it. So who are the people groups in Saharan Africa, such as the Berbers and the Moors? How did these people get there? Who are these people? And now, what's the genetic makeup of these people? And how did Israelites migrate into the land? So at this point, my brothers, you got it. If you need to show your screens and present anything, go ahead and just let me know.
Yeah, my presentation is going to take care of those last two questions all at the same time. Because something I want to add into what the brother was saying prior to this was that the part of Africa that the ancient Europeans knew about was parts of North Africa and parts of Northeast Africa, East Africa, etc. And what's going to be interesting about this is we're talking about this concept of the myth of Sub-Saharan Africa. And people should really understand it as a myth, because you also have this term in your lexicon called trans-Saharan, right? So if there's something called trans-Saharan, we need to understand how this really, really gets down. But to that end, what the ancient Europeans consistently said about these people in North Africa and East Africa, etc., is that they were a black-skinned people or a dark-skinned people, etc. That's not something that's ever been up for debate, and that's not something that historians ever debate.
That's interesting you say that, because they have no problem saying that about the people below the Sahara, but then they tried to whitewash the people above the Sahara, I guess, to claim the majesty of what they felt were those empires, such as Egypt. And you had empires of nations that were just as brilliant, but it seemed like the European was more enamored with Egypt, and maybe perhaps just in my mind, perhaps because of the long connection that they had through the Greeks and through the Romans.
Mm-hmm.
And then even with the advent of what was called Egyptomania in Europe, where they were just overwhelmed with European discoveries or Egyptian discoveries and everything. So, all right. So, more, you got your presentation, brother. I'm gonna let you roll, man. You got it.
Yeah, you need to start off with question 4 right quick. Like, who are the people groups in Saharan Africa, such as the Berbers and the Moors? And just to be clear, Berbers, the people who are considered Berbers and Moors, they extend from Saharan Africa to Sub-Saharan Africa, so-called, right? And that's another reason why this myth needs to get busted, because the continent's not carved up that way. That's not how people live over there in any way, shape, or form. That's not how they understand it on a day-to-day. But one thing that the medieval writers, etc., when you go to the Roman, the Greek, the the Iberian Christian and the Arab sources, they all say the same things about these people here, the Berbers and the Moors, that they're a black-skinned people when they run into them. No one argues over the fact that there's been admixture over time in North Africa, etc. And we'll get into that. We'll get into the genetics of all that. We'll get into the history of all that and the contributions to all that. But no one ever argues over the concept that when from all sides, whoever met these people were saying the same thing. They were a black-skinned people, period. But with that, I'm definitely going to share my screen.
All right.
And I appreciate you for letting me give this presentation and whatnot, because this is a very important topic.
Oh man, I'm just glad. I appreciate you doing it, man, because this is educating me as well as those that are listening, and so we learning something.
So I'm going to introduce the family to somebody who's very important to me, near and dear to my heart. Somebody who's been a personal mentor and teacher, and somebody who's been very integral in my understanding of this topic here and understanding, really putting together a lot of historical concepts in terms of a lot of claims that we make in terms of being people connected to the Bible in Africa, etc. This is Dana Reynolds. Some people know her as Dana Marnici or Dana Reynolds Marnici. She's written many articles. She's contributed to a couple of books. She's written her own book. We're going to get into some of her literature here. She is an ethno-historian, and she is on the front lines and in the center of this conversation of making sure people don't whitewash history in Africa that belongs to black-skinned people. Not just Africa, but also in Arabia and the Middle East. She's at the forefront of discussing something called the Tahama culture in Central Arabia and the Hijaz, which again she breaks down as a black skin, woolly haired culture, etc. That is the proto culture to what we consider to be like an Arabian culture, etc. She does the same thing with North Africa and East Africa, etc. And her work is, I can't tell you how thick with sources her work is. I'm only going to read portions, like small portions of some articles and some snippets from some of her literature, and whatnot. And I promise you, if you go into the rest of it, you're going to be inundated. It's going to be too much to go through. But with that being said, let me go through this, Johnny. So one of the works that she contributed to was The Golden Age of the Moors by Ivan van Sertima. She contributed this portion here, The African Heritage and Ethno-History of the Moors. And again, as an ethno-historian, her work is phenomenal in this area. Again, background to the emergence of early Berber and Arab peoples from prehistory to the Islamic dynasties. And in this book, it's from page 93 to page 150. I'm not going to read all that. I'm just going to read a few snippets just to get a flavor of what she's talking about. Because something she deals directly with is this concept of the Hamitic hypothesis, and also a modern day nationalism that emerges in North Africa, to where people are also trying to potentially demarcate other people as being fake Berbers, and that they're the real Berbers, that the modern people are the real Berbers, etc. So going forward, I'm going to read, and I hope I don't bore you, but I'm definitely going to read like a page or two, maybe 3 in total, from her work here. So I apologize to you if I bore you, but I'm going to read the introduction in a few sparse paragraphs from there, so you kind of get the flavor of where she's coming from. Most of us are not aware that the peoples whom the classical Greek and Roman historians call Berber were black and affiliated with the then contemporary peoples of the East African area. The word Berber, in fact, was used to refer to peoples of the Red Sea area in Africa, as well as North Africans. Similarly, there was an ancient belief that the nomads dwelling in the same latitudes in the deserts of Arabia were peoples whose ancestors had in times far distant roamed the deserts of East Africa. It was such populations that in a large measure comprised the Moorish people. But because of the attribute of blackness, which sharply distinguished them from the bulk of the European people, the word came to be generally used by Europeans to describe persons of black complexion in general.
Can I interrupt you real quick on that point right there? Is it possible to make this bigger, to enlarge it?
Not from the way I have it in my presentation, no.
Okay, no problem.
I got it as big
No
as I
problem.
could get it with keeping it clear.
Okay, no problem. Okay, I get you. I know exactly how that works. Okay, no problem.
The inhabitants of present-day northern Africa are considered ethnically and culturally distinct from the people dwelling south of the Sahara. If this is so, it has only come about in relatively recent times. The 700 years that the Moors dominated the Iberian Peninsula was an era during which many people, mostly of European descent, either migrated or were brought to the lands of Arabia and North Africa. Although large numbers of blacks were brought from the Sudan during that era, studies of the slave traffic of that time show that the numbers of people of Slavic and European descent placed into servitude far exceeded the numbers of Sudanese or other blacks bought and sold by the Moors. The slave trade did not acquire a color until the Portuguese. That's a very important thing to understand. Something that she focuses on heavily is the fact that there is a large portion of European ancestry that's brought into North Africa is actually brought in by the Moors through slavery. It's not just about conquest from other people, but there's a certain portion in time to where the Moors are literally depopulating coastlines in the southern Mediterranean. That's something she gets into heavily, depopulating coastlines. Going forward, this part played by the European captive or slave in the making of the modern North Africans and Middle or Near Easterners has been ignored by historians to such an event that most people are not even aware that such an era even existed. This is partly the fault of the successors of the Orientalist school. The early Orientalist explorers, mainly living and writing in the 18th and 19th centuries and the early part of the 20th century, were basically European adventurers. They were usually of the upper classes, trained in the Arabic language and familiar with such things as the ancient writings of the classical Roman and Greek historians, the old Hebrew text, and some of the traditions of Islam. Many of them wanted to believe and tried to prove that the ancient Arab world and the Orient, especially Egypt, was a primitive form of European civilization, and that North African Berbers and the Arabs of Arabia were noble savages whose European strain had been reduced by intermingling with ignoble, enslaved Negroes. Most of them were anthropologists and ethnohistorians. Very important stuff to understand, family. Some of the later European writers have been a bit more objective in their historical depictions of the ancient world and the world of Islam. According to James Wellard, author of Lost Worlds of Africa, Muslim Africans brought millions of European slaves over the centuries into North Africa, North African ports of Saleh, Tangier, Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, Fez, and Marrakesh. And the northern Egyptian towns, literally millions were documented as being freed in North Africa by various Christian organizations in Europe. Philip Cardin points out the Ajayi and the Crowder's history of West Africa, that the majority of slaves being traded throughout the Mediterranean, including North Africa and the Levant, modern Lebanon, Palestine, Israel, West Syria, etc. Centuries before the fall of Constantinople, when the Black Sea trade was cut off, were of European descent. It is also known that indigenous Bedouins used to come into slave markets of the coastal cities of North Africa and Arabia by way of the desert to secure concubines who were often of European descent. So this is extremely important to understand. Something that Dana points out is that by a large percentage, what changed the face of North Africa in terms of complexion in such a short time of just a few hundred years was this large enslavement that happened by the Moors and the Berbers in North Africa. And again, She's talking about the fact that Christians were actually freeing these slaves, and again, these people were marrying into Berber tribes. They weren't just staying by themselves or whatnot. They were being brought in as concubines again. And she points out in other places that the Moors were literally making people pay tribute via women. So these women were being brought in. They're having children with them, etc. And so on and so forth. And we see how by a large scale it began to change the complexion of North Africa. Again, this is after. Go ahead.
So let me ask this question, because what you just said, man, that was heavy. So basically, from what you read and what you're saying, like you just said, they changed the complexion of North Africa. So a lot of the lighter phenotypes that we see in North Africa that people think just happened because of the Arab migration and invasion, that's not necessarily the case. It's because just same way that people would have been intermixed who took darker skinned Africans other places, the Moors, the dark skinned Africans in North Africa bringing lighter skinned European slaves is what contributed to that.
By the millions.
Wow.
By the millions. So people know about the French being in North Africa. People know about the Spaniards being in North Africa. People know about the Romans being in North Africa. People know about the Goths being in North Africa. People know about the Arabians and whatnot being in North Africa, right? What people don't recognize, again, is that by the millions, the Moors were snatching up people. And again, literally, when I say depopulating coastlines, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating.
That's crazy, because that's what the Portuguese did in some areas in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So the Moors were doing it even before they bring the Portuguese before the Portuguese enter into the slave trade, kind of as trading partners, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you like this, because I've also heard about this question. Are these what the people we call the Barbary pirates who were doing this?
Yeah, the Corsairs were definitely a big part of this, 100%.
Okay.
100%. One man's pirate is another man's Corsair. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So I'm gonna skip down on some stuff. There's some interesting stuff from Nature Knows No Color Line in here that you should definitely go check out. If you don't have that book, you should definitely go cop that book and read it. Interesting read. But she starts breaking down like who the Moors are, etc., and how people recognize them. And there's some very interesting things said here that I want people to understand, because again, this is why I say things aren't up for debate. She says here at the bottom of the page, according to at least a dozen different Greek and Byzantine / Neo-Roman writers, from the first to the 6th century AD, the indigenous Berber population, whom they called Mori or Moors, were a black-skinned, warlike, nomadic, and predatory population stretching from the borders of Egypt to Morocco. They often lived on the borders of the desert and at the foot of mountains, and were said to be accustomed to the usage of horses and camels in battle. At the time of their Islamization, they were bedecked in gold and long robes and armed with javelins, iron implements, swords, and shields, etc. Let me see where I want to pick up from that. In one of the Marshall's writings, Satire the Sixth, around the same era, we read the phrase "woolly hair like a Moor." Silius Italicus, an early writer around the beginning of the Christian era, describes the Moors as the Nigra, or black. Corpus, a 6th century historian, in his Jonah comedy, speaks of their faces nigro colorus, and of their blackness as horrida, or horrifying. Procopius, another 6th century Byzantine historian, says the Moors were a people composed of a number of black-skinned tribes who had gained domination over all of North Africa after the period of the Vandals' ascendancy in Africa. So there's no argument in the ancient world or in the medieval world, etc., in terms of what these people in North Africa looked like, in terms of what their phenotype was in any way, shape, or form. Again, talking about from Egypt to Morocco. from Egypt to Morocco. I could read a lot here, but I don't want to take up too much time.
That's basically everything that's been classified as North Africa by Europeans.
100%. And so Dana gets a lot of pushback because she brings this out, but she only gets pushbacks from she doesn't get pushbacks from historians. She doesn't get pushbacks from people who were educated in the situation. She gets pushback from people who are nationalist and whatnot, right? People who have a modern take on history without understanding the ancient take. But there's a nuance here that I'm going to get into that she brought out in 2016 that I thought was fantastic. I'm going to read an article after this where she talks about her Fear of Blackness Part 2. She's written a couple of great articles that she's turning into a book about this whole topic about the whitewashing of North Africa in the Middle East, etc. That's, again, man, her books are. I have her book, and there's literally pages that sometimes is 3/4 of the page is footnotes. It's amazing how much information she puts into her research.
So she's extremely thorough.
100. She reads everything. She reads everything on the topic from all sides. That's what I loved about her work is she I noticed that she did something that a lot of people don't do. A lot of people stop at the Roman and Greek sources and the Christian sources, and they leave out the Islamic sources or the Arabic sources. And she jumps into all of it because she wants to see all the history from all sides and what everyone has to say. And she paints a more complete picture by doing so.
Now, that's a good point, too, to bring up to those listening. The dismissal of a source because you have a prejudice against the source, because it's either Arabic, i.e. Muslim, or because it's European, will always limit you on getting the full picture and having all the information available to examine yourself. Mm-hmm. If you're biased going into any type of research or study to where you can only accept information if it's from a source that looks like you or sounds the way you want, you're going to always miss key information because the source that looks like you may also give you biased information. And you see Europeans doing that all the time. All right. But you also have some people amongst them who debunk their own, kinsmen, so to speak, for the sake of truth. Mm-hmm. So don't just dismiss something based on the appearance of the source or because you're questioning the credibility of it based on what you think about its background. That's something that we got to stop doing.
Right. And we also got to recognize that we can also be guilty of the same thing by blackwashing certain things that don't need to be blackwashed. You know what I'm saying? Exactly. And so this goes both ways. And that's something that there's a point in here that Dana brings out that I'll show that talks about genetics that'll help make this point a little further or not. But it's a very big point to understand, particularly if you want to understand West African history and you want to understand your connection to West Africa or any connection to potentially biblical peoples or the Levant or the Middle East and whatnot. You're going to need to study sources that are going to be in Arabic. I hate to break it to you because that was the lingua franca of the area. Just like if we want to study history here, we got to study in English because that's the lingua franca of the area we live in.
Now, man, you getting ready to cut us off. Where was the paragraph you stopped at again? I'm looking for. Where'd you stop at?
I stopped at the second paragraph on the right side. On page 95.
You might as well give us the next two because I'm pretty sure the folks in my audience, man, they like information. They studious. So y'all want more to read some more of this sister's information, put a 1 in the chat. If not, we're gonna have Avery and Aerospike do a dance off, and then we're gonna go into the next portion. Y'all want the dance off, or y'all want him to read a little more?
Oh no, I'm definitely reading some more because I got to answer that question.
Aerospike, you ain't supposed to be voting, man. You're supposed to be subject to the dance off. He the first one to vote because he don't want to do the dance off. You see that?
Yeah. So I definitely got to read a few more joints because I got to answer question number 4 about like who were these people, right? Like and so Something that I really appreciated about Dana's work is she specifically goes through these Berber tribes, and she specifically goes through these people who would have made up this conglomerate of people known as the Moors and whatnot. So if you go to page 96 of Golden Age of the Moor, and if you don't have this book, I definitely suggest checking it out. It's definitely a good read.
What's the name of
Particularly
the book again?
Golden Age of the Moor by Ivan van Sertima. A lot of people are familiar with his work. They came before Columbus. And
Yes,
this
sir.
book here, he didn't particularly write so much of it as other people compiled information for him or whatnot. And this is from a big chapter where Dana got to compile over somewhere like almost close to 60 pages of information for him or whatnot. And so it's her portion is fantastic. I'll just say it like that.
I can't believe I don't have this book already, man. I'm looking it up right now as you're talking, and I'm gonna definitely get this book without delay today. Plus I got a bunch of book credits with Amazon too, so I'm definitely going to use this. All right, so here's the book. We put the name of the book in the chat. And if you Google this book, you can even listen to the entire book on YouTube. There's some people who have read the whole thing, put the audiobook on YouTube as well. But I always like to put my eyes on, parchment, and words. And I would recommend other people do that as well, because it helps you retain the information better if you see it yourself. And so, you can listen to the audio book as well as read it. And so you can find the book. It's available on Goodreads. You can probably find it and see here. I just did a quick Google search, and it jumps up African American Literature Book Club and things of this sort. So there's several outlets. If you just Google this, you can acquire that book. So go ahead, good brother. Hit us with some more of it, man.
Yeah, so to get into that question 4, about like who these people were and whatnot. Again, page 96 and 97, other parts do a great job of starting to answer that question. So going down to the second to last paragraph, it starts off by saying, the word Moor signified a black man, and the people who were called Moors were the North African ancestors of the dark brown and brown black peoples of the present day Sahara and the Sahel. Again, present day Sahara and the Sahel. No cutoff anywhere in that. Like they're in the Sahara and the Sahel. Mainly those called Fulani, Tuareg, Zanaga, and Southern Moroccan Kunta and Tebu of the Sahel countries, as well as the Moorish and other black Arabs who lived in Mauritania and throughout the Sahel. They include the Trarza of Mauritania and Senegal, the Mogarba, as well as dozens of other Sudanese Arab tribes, as well as the Chamba of Algeria, the longly lanky dark brown men called Tuareg, who can still be seen veiled and armed with swords and shields, striding through the desert with their camels, and still involved in the desert commerce they were in charge of during the Middle Ages. The copper black Arab Moors are descendants of the Yemenite and Hijazi Arabians, the main bringers of Islam to Africa. They still trace their ancestry to the Yemen or southern Arabia, and like their kinsmen in Yemen, they can be seen playing Moorish melodies with string percussion and wind instruments under shade trees in Mauritania. And what I think is super interesting is here she starts to go into certain sections of these people. She talks about the turban Tibbs and the Zagawa. And the Zagawa are a tribe she talks about quite a bit. When you get into her work, she links these people with the Soninke, the Songhai, and the Zagai. She breaks down how they're all the same people in different points of migration at different points in time with a very similar name, but they're the same people. And something she says that's extremely interesting. I was hearing the other day someone talk about the concept of Jews didn't come into Central and West Africa until the rise of Islam. And something I love about Dana's work is and she has videos about this, and I'll break them down on my channel at one point. But you can hear her talk about this on my channel at length in 2 interviews that we've had. That total somewhere around 10 hours worth of her just breaking stuff down about this very same topic. She's very, very big about this concept of of getting into the converted Berber, or the Berber who's a converted Jew, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she runs into that head first and asks the question, well, if somebody's claiming to have evidence of conversion, who's the people who did the converting and whatnot, right? Because if you can't show that they were converted by somebody, by a group of people who had this tradition and whatnot, you have to assume that these people just had the tradition themselves. And so she asked that question: who's the Jewish group of people who converted the Berbers and other people to Judaism and whatnot? And she surmises that if there was a group of people to do any converting, it was this group of people that was the Soninke, the Songhai, the Zagai, and the Zagawa. And what's interesting about that is she says that they come into Central Africa after the expulsion of Babylon, or after the captivity in Babylon, which is a very interesting story, because we see people coming to Yemen after that. We see people coming to other parts of North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, etc., whatnot after that. Like, so there's a big migration that happens after that. And she surmises that again, well before the rise of Islam, that in Central Africa, specifically Central Africa, and we'll get into sources that break down in West Africa as well, prior to Islam, that there were migrations of people that would have had connection to this Jewish concept or the Israelite concept. Let me see.
Wow. So man, this is bringing a lot of information, man. This is great stuff.
Yes, sir. And so
yeah, just also too on the resources. Ashley makes a great point. Yeah, a lot of these books, like this one in particular, is going to be hard to find. But like she said, it can be acquired for way less of a price. Because Harold's price says it's off Amazon for $1,000, and yeah, I saw it also on the website for like a ridiculous amount of money. But there is one website I posted in the chat where you can get it as a PDF download for
100%. I'm using the PDF right now with this.
Yes,
but I do have my own version, my own copy of the book that I did not have to pay $1,000 for. Like, so unfortunately, so the issue with this book is that the author is no longer alive, and so when that happens, typically books go out of print.
Right,
stuff gets way more expensive, and unfortunately, the information is priceless with this one. But most of the stuff that I'm going to read to you here, you can find on Dana Marnici's or Dana Reynolds' website, which is going to be the next thing that I show you here.
Now, you have your interviews with her on your website?
Yes, sir. She's on my channel. Okay. You can type in the fear of blackness. That's going to be one of the interviews we did, again, on almost 5-hour interview on this specific topic here. And then there was another interview we did that lasted over 6 hours.
Those up so that way we can put the okay, so I'm gonna get the links to those interviews, so that way people can go to your channel and watch those interviews.
Okay, that's what's up. Okay, appreciate that.
And how long? Let me make sure how long back. How far back were those, so that way I can go ahead and pull them right up and bring them to the people.
If you give me just a second, I'll send them to you.
You know what? I got it right here. It can't pop right up.
Yeah.
Pop right up. Dana Marniche and then Dana Reynolds also.
Yeah. I got the most interview time with her out of anybody on the internet. And on top of that, like she's a lovely woman. She actually she used to hold like just open classes where you could just come through, and she was just going through the information on her channel and whatnot. It was phenomenal. Like she's very, very thorough with the information. I'm not going to go through this one so much. Y'all can see what it is. She's talking about the Berbers of the Roman area and the Berbers, the origin of the term and whatnot. And she talks about how all this stuff, how people are, again, saying the same thing all over the place, that they're running into black peoples and whatnot. Something that she points out that's extremely interesting, though, is that this concept of a Berber it spans from East Africa to North Africa. It's not just a North African concept. It goes from the Red Sea to Morocco, etc. And she talks about the Berry people being close to like Somalia, Djibouti, etc. whatnot. And there's what's interesting to understand about that, and I think the brother on the panel can speak to this too, because he's talking about languages and whatnot. I have a lot of Somalian friends and whatnot, and I know people from North Africa and whatnot through the UK and whatnot, and both groups are in the same area. And something that's my Somalian friends were telling me is like, they were like, man, it's tripping me out. Like, because I'm hanging out with some Algerians and whatnot, and I can understand like a good 15-20% of the stuff that they're talking about. Like our language is like I can see where the language overlaps a little bit. I was like, oh really? I was like, that corroborates everything Sister Dana's talking about. That's what's up. That is what's up. So this is her website that I was talking about, afroasiaticblogspot.com, where she has multitudes, like multiple articles spanning years, family. Years. Literally what I'm about to read from here is from literally January 24th, 2016. And again, I'm not even going to read like 40% of this thing. I'm going to read like a small portion of it, right? Because she'll inundate you with stuff. It's so much information and whatnot. But please go check out her website, afroasiaticblogspot.com, and understand if she jokingly said, and it's hilarious. She jokingly says, yeah, I proved the Israelite thing. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't trying to. I was trying to just like, you know what I'm saying, just show certain historical stuff and didn't mean to. But like, yeah, if you're interested in understanding like migration patterns, who people were, who was doing what, when, where, why, like you need to know who Dana Marnichi is or Dana Reynolds or whatnot. If you don't, you're going to see, like people will take you a lot more serious if you start talking about her information. And unfortunately, I was trying to bring this out into the community a couple of years ago for like a year straight. And people didn't want to take the information because she uses a lot of Islamic sources to prove her point. But that being said, one of the areas that I so much appreciated her work was in her second article on the fear of blackness, which again, she's turning into a book. Part 2, Andalusia and the Mori, an exploration of the original Berbers of early sources and their settlements in Spain. Again, I'm just going to read you a few portions of this. Show some pictures that she has in this, and then I'm going to jump into some other stuff right quick. So this is the beginning of the post. This is a post about the settlements in Spain of the once black African populations of the Maghreb, known as the Beriberi or Al-Barabir, in Arabic, Mozambique, Spanish Christian, and Portuguese sources. People of Eastern and Nilotic African origin with biological affiliation to the Beja and other Cushitic speakers, ancient pre-Islamic Arabians, Nilo-Saharans, and Tuareg. It is not about the modern melange of people that colonialists and post-colonial specialists have come to designate as Berbers in attempts to link them with modern European peoples for whatever reason, but about all of the peoples who the West has attempted to write out of the history of Muslim Andalusia. The reason it is important to distinguish between the Berber of today and the ancient people who designated themselves Berbers or Beriberi is that the Berber speakers spotlighted in most academic and political studies today, unlike those of the Arabic texts, are basically a heterogeneous people with diverse cultural and biological origins linked to all of the known civilizations of the ancient world surrounding North Africa. So to be clear, she's saying in ancient times, they were clear. Like, yeah, everybody's like the original people up here were black and whatnot, right? In modern times, she's saying that the modern people being called Berber are a mixed group of people that represent population groups that came in from all the surrounding areas of North Africa. Ancient Berbers were not people that looked or thought like the people of early or modern European and Near Eastern cultures and their various admixtures. The original Berbers were noted by the early Near Eastern observers to be divided into 5 confederations called the Masmuda, Senhaja, the Zanaga, or Zanata, Hawara, and Gamara, all of which were early known as the Moris or the Mori, i.e. the black men. The name Mauritania thus was simply the land of the Moris. For as an old Viking text says, for Mori is the same as black man, and Mauritania is the same as blackness. And she gives the source there. The root of the word Mori since the time of Silius Italicus, Platus was a synonym for the word Niger or Negro among Europeans, including the Christian Spaniards, Mozarabs, and Portuguese. Today, a variety of observers from geneticists to historians assume a European affiliation in particular or a non-black origin of the ancient peoples called Berbers. A modern author writing on the Berber nationalist movement has said among the Ishalan speakers of the Teshlit dialect in southwestern Morocco, as well as the southeast. Amazigh is both a literary archaism and a term denoting white or true Berbers, as distinguished from the black-skinned Berber of the region. And gives the source there. By Berber we can assume the author, Maddie Weitzman, is referring to the slave-descended Ganawa or the Haratin. By white, it is not known whether he means fair-skinned Berbers of modern Morocco or the dark brown and near black Berbers there and in the Maghreb, who have traditionally called themselves by the word Bedan, translated literally as white, but having more of a cultural meaning than anything else. I want to point like that. That's extremely important to understand, because I'm going to show a picture of what a white Berber meant in ancient times, or how they mean it culturally versus how people think, how modern people are trying to use the term and change the concept. But going further, but it is clear from the cover of his book, The Berber Identity Movement and the Challenge to North African States, that the author considers modern Berbers that look more like Europeans to be the true Berbers. And you know what? I think I put a picture. No, I'm going to show you when I get to the picture section, because I'm not too far from it. Going forward, as we have shown in this block, I'm just showing you bits and pieces of this thing. This is not all contiguous. I'm just jumping through this right quick, right? As we have shown in this block, while such people now common to the Mediterranean coast of North Africa in general are greatly modified both biologically and culturally, and could hardly be the best representatives of the early Berbers in the same regions once referred to in Arab, Byzantine, and Roman sources as the 5 nations of Sabines and Himyarites, or as Mori, Numidians, Levas, Indi, and Gautuls, etc. Nor are the present-day fair-skinned people along the coast the best biological or cultural representatives of the people referred to as the second race of Berbers, the latter being, as we have seen, the veiled Tamashek or Tuareg, i.e. Maziks, and their vassal castes. And that term, vassal castes, I'm going to finish reading this here, but I want y'all to understand something. One thing I really loved about getting into Dana's work is she got into this concept of the Tuareg and connecting them to Midianites and whatnot, and other peoples, of course. But she also helped me understand that when Israelite people went into Central and West Africa and the Maghreb, etc., they connected themselves to these Midianite tribes as vassal castes or whatnot. And that becomes extremely important to understand going further when it comes into the transatlantic slave trade and connecting yourself back to these people and whatnot. That's why she jokingly says, I didn't mean to, but I literally proved the Israelite thing. Not that like everybody that came on the slave ship that came across on the slave ship was an Israelite, but that there's people that came across the slave ship that do have a connection to this thing. But she goes on to say about these Tuaregs and their vassal caste, composed mainly, again, listen to this vassal caste composed mainly of the Songhai or Soninke, Zagai, or Rahel, Garo, or Jaroa people. And again, she has a whole link. I love that she does this, but she talks about these people in a whole nother article from Proto-Berbers to Moorish Part 1. And she drops a whole nother set of information on that, right? But going further, she says 1,000 years ago, the Masmuda were the Berber population of the Moroccan coast, whose largest branch was called the Gomorrah or Gomari. Let me see where I want to go to this. As Hussein El-Hain puts it in his historical dictionary of the Berbers, Amazigh, Masmuda branches and subgroups occupied the major parts of Morocco. The Gomorrah all over the Rif, as far as the straits and southward into the plains by the Abu Ragrag and Sabu rivers. The Bargawata and Bergawata of the Atlantic coast of Morocco between Saleh and Safi were also Masmuda, while others believe they were Zanata. It was previous to and during the time of the 12th century, Masmuda led Almohad invasions in the empire of southern Europe and North Africa that observers writing in Arabic referred to the Masmuda as black-skinned and as black Africans. Yet today, most inhabitants of the Rif in Morocco, calling themselves Masmuda and Gomorrah, are as fair as Europeans and sometimes even North European populations. So something that Dana points out is that this happened in just the course of just a few hundred years. Like it's like She says like it took around 700 years for this change to happen. For at one point in time in the 12th century, the Masmuda to be known as Black Africans, to now they're being known as like a European looking population.
So wow. So this is where we start to get into the issue of the whitewashing, more or less, of North Africa.
100%.
Wow. I just think this is fascinating because the reason why there are even Europeans, it not for the sole part, but it looked like for the most part, is because Black Africans brought them there as slaves.
Yeah, 100%. I'm gonna jump through some of this so we can save some time, and I'm gonna jump to
so this would mean that even during the Greek. Probably why on that now it kind of makes sense that map that we showed earlier. Why during Greek colonization, the Greeks really don't occupy that much of North Africa, so to speak, as a large in terms of their a large population presence.
See, that's what people need to understand. Like the Greeks and the Romans didn't get that deep into Africa like that, right? And so, and here's gonna be the funny thing when I get into so one thing I love about Dana's work is she goes to these places. She looks at the people herself. She interviews the people, etc. She talks to them, etc. She also gathers pictures of these people so you know what they look like, right? And what she like, one thing I love about her work is like she'll show you like in certain places again, like these people are still on the coast from the coastlines down to the where the Sahara starts, and they're still you can still see there's European looking people, but you can still see the Black people among them still. So even as whitewashed as it is, they made it a mixed population, not like a completely whitewashed population, if that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, because that's you think about that whole Hermetic hypothesis, they were almost like unashamed at saying, creating a term, Caucasoid or Caucasian Hamites. Again, like I said, that's like saying, fat-free pork chops or something like that. It just it don't go together. How you gonna, it just, but they would go through these hoops, all based on trying to decolorize, I guess, so to speak, the people, white them out. White them out, basically, almost like just spray painting over the people to say, well, this actually the reason why they were so brilliant and so advanced was because they were white, because they had to further substantiate slavery and their right to do so or manifest destiny, that whole thing. And then also say, this is why scientists also backs us up by saying that the Black man is inferior, his brain is smaller, his all these different things. And so it's like all of this is tied into one big, huge ball of racist yarn.
100%.
Wow, man, this is crazy, man. It's incredible though, man. Because we always talk about how deep does the rabbit hole go. Shoot, I don't think we dug this deep.
Yeah. And so now we're getting into the parts where it gets a little bit muddy, because now we're going to get into the genetics and whatnot. Because the reality is that the majority of Europeans that were brought in were female, right? And so a lot of these lighter skinned people still retain the haplogroups of the founding populations and whatnot. And so there's this argument of we're the original people, and they look completely different. But genetically speaking, there's a large chunk of them that actually still connect haplogroup wise to the original population. So this is a situation to where their great grandfather was a jet black man, and through centuries of mixing and whatnot, they don't look nothing like their great grandpap. You know what I'm saying? But through intermixing, a lot of intermixing, there's still mixed phenotypes and whatnot. But like again, like she keeps pointing out, they look more European than they do African in a lot of these areas and whatnot in mass. And so she points that out by pointing out the fact that it's clear that the so-called Berber Y haplogroup EM81 or E1B1B1 or E1B1B, excuse me, in modern Moroccan Berber speakers is a legacy of the one-time Tuareg presence along the coast of North Africa. It is the dominant haplogroup of the Tuareg, including those to the far south in Burkina Faso, right? Burkina Faso. That's south of Mali, fam. South of Mali, at Goram Goram in Gosi in Mali. It is also high among the Sahrawi of Morocco. And that's an interesting group of people to look at, the Sahrawi, because they are a group of people who have a large amount of Natufian genetics in their admixture, but also a good chunk of what, air quotes, sub-Saharan African DNA, right? The Sahrawi also go down through, it's not just Morocco. They go through the Sahel, they connect in the Sahel, etc. whatnot, right? Again, the Sahrawi of Morocco, who are also in large part relatively dark-skinned, but it decreases as one heads from the south to the north in Morocco. Right? As a result, a large majority of the Berber-speaking male lineages belong to the Y chromosomal E1B1B/EM81 haplogroup. The frequency ranged from 79% to 98% in all localities sampled. Then the E1B1B2 EM183 was the most dominant subclade in our samples, which ranged from 65 to 83%. In contrast, the E1B1B1 EM107 and EM165 subclades weren't found in our samples. Our results suggested a predominance of EM81 haplogroup among Moroccan Berber-speaking male and decreasing gradient from south to north. Again, decreasing gradient from south to north. I'm not going to get into this whole one here, but hold on, what portion do I want to read? Now, this touches on the same bit, but this part here gets super interesting. And I definitely, and Ibri, if you want to, you can touch on this part, because I know you dig this bit here. Finally, there is this article, Genetic Structure of Tunisian Ethnic Groups Revealed by Paternal Lineages, by Karima Fadlawi Zid. The most common lineage was the North African haplogroup EM81, 71%, being fixed in 2 Berber samples, suggesting isolation and genetic drift. Differential levels of paternal gene flow from the Near East were detected in the Tunisian samples of JM267, lineage of over 30%. However, no major sub-Saharan African or European influence was found. This result contrasts with the high amount of sub-Saharan and Eurasian maternal lineages previously described in Tunisia. Overall, our results reveal a certain genetic interpopulation diversity, especially among Berber groups, and sexual asymmetry. Paternal lineage being mostly of autochthonous origin. So she's saying that that these EM81 lineages are native to the area, basically. And so, Ibri, would you want to touch on these lineages right quick or no?
No, you got it. You got it.
You don't want to say nothing about E and J at all?
No, this actually summarizes it perfectly about how, EM 81 is pretty much has always been in North Africa for at least the past 4,000 years. And J came in probably about 2,000 to 3,000 years ago, but E was there way before J. But yeah, this sums it up pretty.
So for people who don't know, the majority of African Americans are E1B1A. Are they not?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Some are E1B1B, as we're finding here, but even if they're not E1B1B, if they're E1B1A, they're basically cousins to E1B1B, aren't they?
That's correct. And
So
African American. Yeah.
No, you go ahead. You got it.
I know an African American on Clubhouse, Max. If you see him in our rooms, he has the North African E1B1B. I think he's EM 183.
Mm-hmm. And they were yep.
So yeah, some of us have these North African Y chromosomes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, indeed. And so just with that, these are pictures that she has in her articles. So I'm just going to go through these real quick and I'll be done with going through Dana's work. But again, this is in Tunisia. This is what I mean about a mixed population still, right? Like, so these are all Berber girls. From left to right, they're all considered Berbers and whatnot, speaking the same language, same culture, doing the same thing and whatnot. But we can see how different the phenotypes are. Like, we all got cousins that look like this right here. Some of us got cousins that look like this and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? But
I was
like,
just about to say that. It looked like my family right there.
No, that's what I'm saying, fam. And like, so a lot of people need to understand that even though it's mixed, this is what a typical family reunion in North Africa looks like. It's a blended family, and people
You know
really
what's
need to understand
crazy about you showing this picture? I was watching a video prior to us doing this, and this is exactly what was on the video. All the people in that video were this diverse, but they were the same family. And the women were singing and things of this sort. And I was looking and I said, yeah, this does look like my family reunion. It looks like probably a lot of our family reunions, but people again would think the diversity here means that these are totally unrelated people, but they're not.
And here's an interesting thing. So all these girls could look different, but all have the same haplogroup.
Wow.
Could have this is how genetics works. Like, so again, phenotype is fluid, fam. Phenotype is fluid. I mean, these are modern Berbers of today's Tunisia and elsewhere in the northern Maghreb. Going further, this is just an ancient picture in Majorca during the reign of the Almohad Mazmuda Berbers, right? Like, so this is what the Mazmuda looked like, what she was talking about back in the 12th century, and today they look more like the person on the left. So this is what they used to look like en masse, and this is what they kind of look like now. This is super interesting. When Isidore of Seville wrote of the Moors in the 6th century being black as night, he probably wasn't exaggerating. This is what Dana's saying. This man hails from between the borders of modern Mauritania and Senegal. Again, modern Mauritania and Senegal. Such people have very likely been pushed from places further north, a remnant of the once black African Mazmuda and Zenata clans. This is this is a Berber, again, in sub-Saharan, air quotes, West Africa in the Sahel. This, I want y'all to take a really, really good look. This is what a white Moor or a tawny Moor looks like via the culture of the people.
Wow.
Man, that's everybody's uncle.
Yes, I was just thinking there.
That's all our uncles right there looking right at him.
So y'all saw that picture of Dana that I put up on the screen, right? Dana said when she went over here, they all called her white. She was like, I had to stop. I was offended. She's like, I'm not white, I'm black. They're like, no, girl, you're white. Over here, you're white. It is what it is. She's like, huh, okay. And so another thing to understand is Sister Dana Marnici, she's also Fulani and whatnot, right? She reps that very much so. And so like she had to recognize, okay, this is a cultural thing. I had to understand. She talks about that part greatly, about how again that this concept of Badan or being white is just it's another way they talked about people who have black skin, but it was a different type of black skin. Like, so these people could be called ruddy for our context, right? But this is what a tawny Moor or a white Moor looked like from the original concept via the culture, whatnot. And in modern times, we're seeing that the actual, again, European people that carry the same haplogroups are trying to make it more of a skin tone thing than a cultural concept. And again, this cultural concept we can find in our own text. So in the Bible, you can find the concept of the nobles of Jerusalem and the nobles of Judah that are being called white, but or Huram or Hori. But it's a figurative concept, right? It's not a literal concept. This is something we see in the Middle East, Levant, North Africa. It's consistent in that kind of a culture and whatnot.
But that's crazy because so when the Bible says white, this is what it's meaning.
Jeez.
Man. And some brother Naomi Ubuntu made a great observation, which you actually proved earlier when he said they say dark skin only came to North Africa because of slavery, but no, it's European white skin that came to North Africa because of slavery.
Facts.
Because black Moors enslaved white Europeans
by the millions. Facts.
Wow. So they told the history in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like Aerospike, man. This is mind blowing, man.
Right.
This
So
definitely
check out this source
gets
here from
stuff.
Leo Africanus, right? So the Tani Moors are divided into 5 several people or tribes. The tribes called the Senhaji, Mazmuri, Zeneti, Hakari, or Ogramuri. Translation of Leo Africanus, 16th century categorization of the Berbers in history. Like again, this is these are those Tani Moors he's talking about. The Berber Tani Moors meet up in southern Morocco. This is southern Morocco, fam. So again, we're talking about like my man was saying, like, no, they still comprises this is the Sahara. Yeah, the Sahara still looks like this. This is what the Sahrawi people look like.
So, bro, wait a minute. So, biblically speaking, I'm a white man.
Uh-huh. Oh, you know what? Particularly you, because like again, the way your skin shines, like the way your skin texture, the way people like recognize you, like you look like you're East African. Fam, no, you would specifically have like the Kareem, like so in Arabic it's Kareem, right? In Hebrew it's Khori or Haram or whatnot, right? It's this concept of being noble and being pure. The concept of whiteness has to do with purity. It has nothing to do with white skin or whatnot. But in the Middle East and whatnot, in Levant, it actually has this concept of having this shining black skin, right? With almost like a ruddy complexion that comes with it or whatnot. So no, you would totally be culturally known as that, 100%.
Abu called me Laban Morocco. Yeah, I guess that's what I would be. So man, I want some white privilege now. Tomorrow I'm gonna wake up with a different attitude.
Hey, you know what's crazy? So check this out. These people right here, when they migrate to America, you know what they got to check off on the census, my G? They check off white.
Yep.
Right.
Egyptians
do the same thing. There's an Egyptian man who's been trying to sue the government for over a decade. And they're like, nah, homie, our laws are the way the laws are. You like you gotta identify as white. And the dude looked like any one of us, man.
Yep, I've seen them.
Even Somalis would identify probably as white.
Yeah, they have to check off that box 100%.
Yeah,
the Sudan 100%. They got to do the same thing.
Yep.
Be black as midnight, checking off the white box.
It's insane. Yeah.
Man, I want my white privilege. I'm tomorrow. Yes, on. Wow, man.
Hey, you know it'd be crazy. I say this all the time, right? Like, so if we all checked off white tomorrow, it would end white supremacy in a day.
Oh man, people lose their mind. They would go crazy like the white guy who found out when he did his DNA test, his ancestors were black. He flipped out.
Yeah, and for people who want to look up the case I was talking about, his name is Mustafa Hefni. Mustafa Hefni. He looks just like any one of these people here on the screen. Real talk.
Wow, man. So that right there. Wow. So when we talk about how the Bible doesn't really go into skin color, it does give descriptions of the people, but it's relative to how those people would have been categorized culturally according to that day and time or that ethnicity in that part of the world. So when they say they were in the scripture where it says they were white, it means they look like this, which to us in our day and time would be black people.
And you know what's serious about this?
Wow.
So these people autosomally, right? Autosomally carry around like 30% plus 30-40% of Natufian genetics. You want to break that one down, Avery?
Yeah, I can do that. So
what's the importance of having 30 to 40% Natufian genetics? Who are the Natufians? Why are they important?
Well, they're important for several reasons. So the Natufians are believed to be basically Proto-Afroasiatic, the ancestors of Proto-Afroasiatic peoples. And so Proto-Afroasiatic would include, Egyptian, Cushitic, Amazigh or Berber, Chadic, Semitic, Omatic, all the Afroasiatic languages. A map can probably be pulled up to, so y'all can have a visualization. As a matter of fact, maybe I should. Well, actually, do you want me to pull up maps and stuff more, or just give a quick?
Just give a quick breakdown. You're good.
Okay. So yeah, Natufians are the ancestors of Proto-Afroasiatic peoples. So these peoples right here, North Africans and Sahelian populations, they carry Natufian autosomes, which is very important. Also, the Natufians, by the way, they carried haplogroup E as their paternal markers, and so these groups of men likely descend from Natufians or cousin groups to Natufians, like Ibero-Maurutians, because Ibero-Maurutians they aren't Natufian, but they do carry like Ibero-Maurutians carry like 65% uh, Levantine DNA, the same type of Levantine DNA that the Natufians have, and their haplogroup, the Ibero-Maurutians haplogroup, is basically a cousin branch to the Natufian haplogroup. And so yeah, it makes a lot of sense that these groups would have a lot of Natufian DNA, but they would also have a lot of Ibero-Mauritian DNA. They might have more Ibero-Mauritian than Natufian, but yeah, these are all cousin ethnic groups, anyways. The antecedents of Amazigh and Proto-Afro-Asiatic and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just keep running through this and show a few more pictures of what Berbers look like and can look like in the modern Sahara people. Modern Sahara. Again, these are Tuareg people. She was talking about them being masked and having swords and all that kind of stuff. And they also deal with the indigo trade or whatnot. And the indigo skill set of using indigo and whatnot, which is important to understand because that actually becomes part of a group of people who were taken in the slave trade to the Carolinas in Georgia, etc., whatnot, to grow indigo and make indigo for people and whatnot. It's a big part of the early slave trade and whatnot. Again, these are the same Tuareg of Libya. The same mass people with swords, hundreds of years later, still black. Still black. Again, this is a Tuareg girl in Libya. This is Libya, family. This is Libya. Again, this is also in Libya. People in Libya. I like this. She talks a lot about the Garamantes and the Zagawa Berbers, etc. Very interesting information on this, man. Again, this is a town in Twat. This is Twat is a town in between. It's in like the Central Sahara and whatnot. Like it's in between the Sahel and in like the North of Sahara and whatnot. But it's oasis in the North Sahara, she writes here, of Algeria. The inhabitants speak the dialect of Zanata Berber called Tanzanite. Many towns in the northern Sahara were established in the 6th century AD by the Ibadi. And she talks about them in a whole other situation and whatnot. But again, this is modern day Algeria. Modern day Algeria. These are the immigrant people. Fishermen in Mauritania.
You causing a crisis of identity, man. Now all of the black folks in the chat don't want to be white. They just found out they was all white. We all like Uncle Ruckus. He was white.
If you only knew, fam. I'll tell you right now, I got white on my census, Drake.
What did he say? I got that revitiligo, the opposite of what Michael Jackson had. He gets lighter and whiter. I just get darker and darker. That's what he said, right? Wow, man. This is amazing. It helps us though now, even when you bring this point out, it actually helps us with our theology. Fact. In terms of how to look at scripture the way ancient people would have read that.
100%. No, it blew my mind. Like it literally blew my mind. Like and understanding the culture of it. It helped me understand a lot. And again, once you understand that aspect of stuff, there's an aspect of the slave trade that opens up to you it does in no other way. Because when you understand, so the way it works in terms of like, well, we were just talking about, right? Like, so let's say you were the host tribe, like you were the Tuareg or whatnot. You would be the white people. if we were your vassal tribes, it's like we're being your sojourners or whatnot, right? We're being like the Ger or the Nakar or whatnot, right? If we're in that situation, we're being called black by them, right? It doesn't matter what our skin tone is, right? So it's a way of denoting who the outsider is and who the noblemen of the tribe are and whatnot, right? And so when, again, this is important to understand, when slave raids were happening and all that kind of stuff, and we had Africans selling other Africans and whatnot, people need to understand the first people that were getting sold were those vassal groups and those vassal caste groups and whatnot. So a lot of times you had the Israelite people being amongst those vassal caste groups that were the sojourners because they were migrating into the area and whatnot, right? And so once you understand that concept, fam, there's so much that opens up to you and whatnot. But yeah, that might be a little too much for the moment.
By the way, Moore, whenever you're ready, I do have some interesting maps I can show the people when you're done.
Yeah, I got just a few more pictures and whatnot. You can grab it. Again, this is a Berber woman of the northern Maghreb. This isn't Sub-Saharan. This is northern Maghreb, fam. I mean, I know a bunch of Somalian girls look just like that, man. Again, these are the Sanhaja people, right? And Berbers from, again, people from the Sahara and whatnot, right? A lot of black Berbers, family. People need to understand it's a lot of black-looking people in the Sahel looking like this, dressed like this. This is their culture. This is a Berbish man, claimed to be from the Lamtuna Berbers, right? Again, another portion of the Berbers and whatnot, fam. This is what Berbers look like in modern Africa. I'm going to jump through this and just get to the last one right quick. Again, these are Berber couple in Tunisia, etc. Well, there's something she pointed out that I thought was super interesting. So a lot of people have seen this movie. This is a character played by Morgan Freeman, who was a Moorish character, right? And Dana writes this: I wonder if the directors of the movie Robin Hood knew the appropriateness of their choice to cast actor Morgan Freeman, a man of Tuareg and Songhai biological origin, to play the Moor. So if you look into DNA tests that he's done, and he's done stuff with I forgot the dude's name. I'm blanking out right now, but he's like the famous the PBS
Dr. Henry Louis Gates.
Yeah. He did stuff with Louis Gates and whatnot. Him and Tina Turner both came back with Tuareg DNA. And
by the way, there's a free copy of The Golden Age of the Moors available. It's in the Internet Archive.
Yes,
I was wondering.
And so I have it posted it in the chat for everyone who wants it. And I also put it in the description along with the other resources that we've shown here for those who are interested in downloading the book. So like Brother Moore said, I almost said Dr. Moore. You might need to go back and get your doctorate, brother.
I might need to, bro.
It's an old book that's out of print, but it is now available in the public archive. So you can get the book now, download it in PDF format. I just happened to come across it on a whim. And so here it is. And then, and so that way you all can have it for your collection as well. All right.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Something I'm very endeared to this picture because Morgan Freeman is like a slightly lighter skinned version of my father. Like my father favors him quite heavily. And what's interesting about this is that I found out that through my father, I have DNA that goes straight back to the Sahel. Like I have my haplogroup is EM33, and it's a heavy Sahelian DNA. You find it all day in Mauritania and in Mali, etc., Burkina Faso, all that type of stuff, northern Nigeria, all that. So this was something that tickled me in a special way because I was like, man, like this, I really connected this, and I love the movie and I love Morgan Freeman as an actor. I was like, well, okay, my man got some Tuareg descent. That's what's up. But go ahead, Avery, you got it right here. I got
Can you
I can pause it.
can you filibuster for just a few more, just like just a little bit longer? I got a text message.
I got a
Okay.
question. It's okay for Orthodox more of that. Is that cool?
Yes, sir. Always.
Okay, cool. I was wondering when you were showing that picture of Morgan Freeman, another culture came up to my mind that I've seen. Well, I've seen represented when I went to because my nerd confession. When I went to the Renaissance Fair about 20 years ago, we had, again, when you think of Renaissance, we always think again like the medieval knights of Europe and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But there were people there representing the Saracens. They
100%.
They were us. So the question is, are these people the same people group, the Saracens?
Yes, 100%. But there's also two ways to understand it, because the Saracens represent they first come into to being written about in antiquity in terms of being a group of people who were in the Levant, the Saracenoid, and they're like a group of people raiding the Romans and other groups and whatnot. They're like a marauding group, and like they're like Israelite people, Hebrew people who they got pushed out of Israel and whatnot, but they stayed in the desert so they kind of like ride out on the Romans and whatnot. But then they eventually joined the Muslims and whatnot. And then after some crusades were popping off, they eventually moved to North Africa and whatnot, right? So there's at one point in time, like the Moors are known to be like in the west and the Saracens to be in the east and whatnot. And then another portion of time, you see the Saracens and the Moors linked together. And so ironically, literally in this movie, there's a particular scene where I'm laughing because my man says, there's a blind dude saying, Azim, what manner of name is this? And right before he says that, he's talking about he says a curse be on all Saracens and Moors, right? Because they're fighting in the Crusades and whatnot. You know what I'm saying? And so they're definitely linked and whatnot, 100%.
Okay, so I was thinking about them and the Sabians talked about in the scripture. And I was like, well, I'm like the Sabians. I'm like, I think they're all the same people.
Yeah, that's what you're saying is super interesting, because a lot of people don't know that the Sabians were in like Moorish Spain and whatnot, and and this migration is documented. Like the Himyarites and Ethiopians were coming through all day.
Okay, yeah, this is something. Like I said, this is extremely fascinating. There was some things that, well, what if if I start we bring up after the Brother Evely with the migratory thing, it's something I found today in my research that blew me away after I heard something from I don't know if you heard William Brown's interview with Dr. Ehan Eliab. Yeah, he said something there that when I saw what I saw today in my research, I'm like, that's it. It's confirmed.
Hey,
now.
Brother Isaiah, I believe your mic is open. There we go.
Okay. Yeah, he said some things that kind of basically blew my mind. I'm like, okay, I think we now have a confirmation of things that I just saw. Because I'm trying to say my focus was basically to find a language pattern going from east to west, and Dr. Ehan actually confirmed it.
Interesting.
So we'll start talking about that. So, and I want Evie to go first because I definitely want to hear that. What he has to say about it, because again, this is extremely, extremely fascinating.
I don't know if Evie is ready, so I'm gonna just keep going until he's ready.
Right.
Yeah, can you go a little bit longer?
Yeah, I got you. No, I got slides. You good?
Yeah, I'm
so
gonna
just jump in whenever you're ready, bro. So something I wanted to touch on was the concept of like this trans-Saharan concept. Like even going back to when we were being taken from West Africa and put on slave ships and whatnot. Even during that time period, in places like Mali, in West Africa and whatnot, in the Sahel and whatnot, we were connected trans-Saharanly to the rest of Africa and whatnot. There was no like we weren't cut off or whatnot. It wasn't like that in any way, shape, or form. So to illustrate that a little bit, I want to show something. I want to illustrate a few points at the same time if I can, but at the very least, I'm going to illustrate one. In this book, Servants of Allah by Sylvian Daouf. I mean, if you don't have this book, you don't have to be a Muslim to appreciate this book. There's a lot of important information that can connect you back to a Hebrew culture if you understand what you're looking at. Particularly this part here. Something she writes in her book is this. on page 61, speaking about like again understanding that Arabic is the lingua franca at the time, and it's connected them to other parts of the world at that point in time. Just understand it from this concept. She's saying, besides their literacy and dedication to their faith, what distinguished the clerics, teachers, students, rulers, and traders was their contact with the wider world. The intelligentsia of Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Iraq, Egypt, and Arabia, whom they met in Mecca and Cairo, or in their homeland when the foreigners visited. The scholars were familiar with the works of Muslim intellectuals from a wide range of countries who used Arabic as their vehicle of communication. They also had access to books from other religions in their Arabic versions, as confirmed by Mungo Park, who mentions having seen the Pentateuch of Moses, the Psalms of David, and the New Testament of Jesus that he called the Book of Isaiah during his travel in the Senegambia at the end of the 18th century. European philosophers such as Plato, Aristotle, Hippocrates, and Euclid were also known in Arabic translations, right? And just to illustrate that real quick, I want people to see this map of trade routes in the 1400s, right? This isn't, I'm not even going back in ancient times. This is when we're starting to get enslaved and whatnot, right? We can already see the trans-Saharan routes that link East Africa from Ethiopia to West Africa. We can see them going from Northeast Africa down to West Africa. We can see them going from Northwest Africa down to West Africa again. But there's this trans-Saharan, trans-Sahel trade route that's connecting all of this prior to, like, even again up until the time we're getting enslaved. This is how we understand Africa, as culturally speaking, from the people being there. We don't have this everything cuts off at the Sahara thing. No, it's hence trans-Saharan. Trans-Saharan. We didn't do sub-Saharan, we did trans-Saharan. You feel me?
So now break that down for us. The difference between trans-Saharan versus sub-Saharan.
Let me go back so you can have a picture to look at that. So sub-Saharan means that there's this culture beneath the Sahara that's separate from this culture above the Sahara, right? And trans-Saharan means no, they're interconnected. They still work with each other. They still got connections. They're not separated. Hence, you see all these trade routes. You know what I'm saying?
That makes perfect sense, man. Perfect sense. Wow.
And so, waiting for Eber to get back, I'm going to break down some migration patterns that Israelites.
Keep going more. Almost.
No, you good? Yeah, no, I good. I got this last little section, so you're straight. So, something I'm going to break down is migration patterns of Israelites into West Africa and over different time periods and whatnot. And I'm going to talk about three basic directions of migration. I'm going to talk about from East Africa and Yemen to West Africa, Northeast Africa to West Africa, and then Northwest Africa to West Africa, just in general. So one of the groups I'm going to talk about is the B'nai Israel and their chronicles in West Africa. So if you go to the Tariq al-Fatash, these are the Timbuktu Chronicles. If you go to manuscript C of the Tariq al-Fatash, a community called the B'nai Israel existed in Tindirma, Mali, circa 1402. They were said to own 333 wells, had 7 leaders, and had an army of 1,500 men. Tindirma is in the modern Timbuktu region of Mali. You give an idea where it's at. This section right here. This is an article from the B'nai Israel themselves talking about the fact that even though they're currently Muslims, they descend from Israelites and break down their migration. So they talk about in this article, and you know what? I should link. I'll link this in the chat. I'll link this in the chat in just a second. But something they talk about is they talk about them being Jews that descended from Egypt or Egyptian Jews, right? And what's even more so interesting about that is they say, we know our people came from Egypt to Somalia and from there to Nigeria, where they split about 1,000 years ago. So they split in Nigeria 1,000 years ago is what they're saying. One branch of the two families went to Mali, another to Guinea, and we settled here. So they're in Senegal. So they're talking about they came from Egypt, went to Somalia, then to Nigeria, then branched out to Mali, Guinea, and Senegal. The Bani Israel are speakers of the Jahanki dialect, the language of the Jahanki tribe, which the International Journal of African Historical Studies says migrated down the Niger River, settling in Mali, Guinea, Gambia, and Senegal. So their language follows their migration pattern that they're taught, that they're saying that their story that they have in their oral stories and whatnot. And so just so you can understand, these are some of the areas that they said that they went to and whatnot. So this is the Sokoto state. These are all Fulani and Jahanki related states and whatnot. This is the Sokoto Caliphate in Nigeria. This is Masina, which is in Mali. This is Futa Jalon, which is in Guinea, and this is Futa Toro, which is in Senegal. All these places have people connected to Israelite migrations and whatnot. Going into, you ready, Ibri, or no?
Yeah, I'm ready. I was gonna let you finish.
Yeah, I got just a couple more things, and then I'll let you have it. Actually, can you fill in for like 30 seconds?
Me?
Yeah, I gotta go turn something off right quick.
Okay.
2 seconds.
But yeah, what I'm about to prepare y'all is I'm gonna kind of go over the migration patterns and the DNA that the groups that Moore had named earlier. I'm gonna go into their autosomes and their Y DNA, but I want to like give y'all visual aid and show you like where their ancestors are coming from, what time period they entered into North Africa, and things of that nature. Because I think it's good to give a visual aid and kind of show y'all how they got to where they are, and what their genetic background would be. Because a lot of y'all are going to be shocked when it comes to their DNA, and especially when you talk to people online about Ibero-Mauritian DNA or Natufian DNA. A lot of people typically think that people with this type of DNA look a particular kind of way, more on the lighter side of things. But you know, people can carry Ibero-Mauritian DNA and Natufian DNA and look exactly like the people that Moore has showed. And so I was just going to show y'all why that is, the migration pattern, and the time period. I see Moore's back.
Yeah, I'm back. I got to go in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to run through these slides right quick, and I'm going to let y'all have it from there. So
I just don't want y'all to ruin, my sub-Canadian American hypothesis, man, for all these sub-Canadian white black people that's listening right now. It was actually
all these subarctic people. I got you.
Right. See, we try to hold on to our sub-Canadian identity. Canada trying to keep us down, brother.
Yes, sir. So real quick, I'm going to run through this other migration from this aspect of Ethiopia, Yemen, and whatnot, right? So we saw this first one that came from Egypt and whatnot, even though they went to East Africa as well and came over. I'm going to talk about this other joint that came from Yemen and whatnot. So we talk about the Limba, the people of the dove, as they call themselves. They say that they came from Babylon and went to Yemen. And so, you know what? I don't have the full time to get through all this, but this is these are sources that Dana brought out in her book, the African and Arabian Origins of the Hebrew Bible, by Dana Reynolds Marnichi. This is page 172, which breaks down some Jewish connections to Israelite or Israelite tribes in Arabia and whatnot in Yemen, but also Levite tribes, right? So, well, you know what? I'll read quickly here. This is the clan of Eleazar in Yemen. The 9th century Persian Yemenite Wahab ibn Munabi was Jewish, spoke of the lineage of the Banu el-Harith tribe, from whom come several of the more recent Zaharan tribes of Asir. Wahab wrote of the priestly line in Eleazar, he is Elias bin Yasin bin Finhas bin Eleazar bin Harun bin Imran. Allah sent him to the children of Israel after his Kel, peace be upon him. So they're talking about Levite tribes, amongst others, in Yemen and whatnot, which help corroborate the story of the Limba and whatnot. She also talks about tribes of Manasseh, and she even gets into a bunch of tribes of Judah in her stuff. This is a definitely expensive book, but it's worth the buy. But she definitely kills the information. I'm gonna get into this on a deeper conversation later because I got to cut this one a little bit short. But something that's important to understand is that Yemen, even around the concept of like the Babylonian Empire, around that time period, Yemen had thriving Jewish cities and towns, etc. Thriving Jewish cities and towns. In fact, a lot of people don't understand that at a certain point in time, there was going to be more Jews in Arabia than were in the Levant. That's a lot to get into, but people really need to understand that because that contributes to a large migration that happens to West Africa from Yemen. So this is
so that would also have to do with a lot of the terms that end up becoming a part of the Arabic language that actually pre-existed the Arabic language itself in Islam, such as Inshallah, Alhamdulillah, Allah Akbar, Allah, the term Allah itself.
The name Muhammad, even of itself, right? Like, so the name Muhammad,
right.
You can find the Himyarite, Jewish Himyarite inscriptions to where they're using the name Muhammad to refer to the Messiah. It's just another epithet of the Messiah. And this is before the birth of Muhammad.
Even names, right? That's incredible. That's incredible. So
Yes.
all you that's listening, all you Christians and Israelites that's listening, when you say Assalamu alaikum, it don't even mean you're a Muslim. You're just speaking a language. You're saying a phrase or terminology that people use even prior to Islam.
And so two things that Dana brings out is that there's a Tahamic culture over here in Western Arabia that is again a black culture that does a lot of stuff over there. And she breaks out that the Hadramaut is known as like the blackest part of Arabia. And so this is where the Lemba went to after they left Babylon and whatnot, right? And so they went into this central part here in a place called Senna. You can see Senna on the map. There's two Sennas, and this is the one I'm talking about over here on the top right. This is the one that the Lemba went to. And then from there, they sailed down this way. This is the remnants of Senna. And so Tudor Parfit went there, and he found out, like, so the Lemba talk about that they have a migration from Senna to East Africa and whatnot, and that they did so because of a drought. But when he went to where they said they came from, he found out that there was a story there of the people of Senna and the Lemba leaving a second time during a flood when a dam breaks or whatnot, and that they went into Africa a second time. He confirmed that one from Yemen and whatnot, right? I got that talking to him and talking to Cohen Hamadisha, a Lemba Cohen in an interview and whatnot. And what's interesting about that is something that Dana's work talks about as she connects this Yemenite migration to this time period of where this flood would have happened, or a similar time period, because this dam that breaks that causes the flood happens during a war between the Christians and the Jews, to where the Jews have been oppressing Christians in the northern part of Arabia, in Najran, and the Ethiopian Christians actually come through and help bail them out or whatnot, and it sends this migration of people into Africa in the 6th century, again prior to the rise of Islam. And again, these are the people of the modern Hadramaut. This is what people in the modern Hadramaut look like. You have other phenotypes, but these people are still there. Still there. And again, this is in pictures from the Real Black Genesis, Demythologizing the First People of the book by Dana Marnici, again, by Dana Reynolds Marnici. This is another one from another one of her articles.
That lady almost looked like Shirley Griff's sister or something. Shirley, I know you in the chat. That woman on the screen looked like you a little bit.
Wait a minute. There we go. So when they come through, I did skip through that. I'm sorry, I was supposed to read that, but that was going through. Hold up. Here we go. The Tariq al-Sudan. Again, more.
The sister that you showed on the previous slide looked like one of the sisters actually in our chat, at least to me.
I'm with it. No, I got a cousin look like old girl. You know what I'm saying? Straight up and down. But so we also find that in the annals of Timbuktu that in the Tariq al-Sudan, that the founder of the Za or Zua dynasty was a man called Zua al-Yaman, meaning he came from Yemen. He's said to have migrated from Yemen and settled in the town of Kukia in Mali and started a large set of dynasties, I think like 11 or 13, before converting to Islam. And so they come through again. Like he's believed to believe. In the local legends state that Zua al-Yaman was a member of the Jewish communities that migrated from Yemen after the Aksumite Ethiopians defeated the Jewish king of Himyar, Yusuf Nawas, in the 6th century. Right. So again, this is before the rise of Islam. We have this large migration of people coming in to West Africa. Himyar was a kingdom in what would be modern day Yemen and was in power from 110 BC to 525 CE. Judaism was the state religion of Himyar since around circa 380 CE. Himyar also conquered the Hadramaut region of Yemen and the neighboring Sabian kingdoms. So again, this bit about the Sabian, like there's a big connection to the Sabian migration going from east to west for centuries, fam, centuries. And again, real quick, this is the Himyarite kingdom, where this migration came from, and this is where they went to Kokia in Mali. So yeah, and here's something interesting. So on the right is the Lemba Coin brother, Coin Hamadishe. Lovely brother. I got to sit down and have a few conversations with him online and many offline. Beautiful, beautiful brother. On the left is a Mende man from Mali. You can already see the phenotypical similarities or whatnot.
Wow. And it's separated by thousands of miles, if I'm not mistaken.
And what's possible is that a second Lemba migration went into Mali, right? And so they would very easily blend in. And so what's interesting about this is that we know that the Lemba carry J markers at a very high level. And something we've been able to find amongst the Tuareg, the people we've been talking about here quite a bit in this particular broadcast, is in Mali and other places around there, they also carry the J marker. So it's possible that the people in Mali carry a J marker that is connected to the Lemba specifically. Very, very possible. I got one more quick one, and then I'm done. I'll give it up to the people and whatnot. Here we got the source here: Black Jews, a religious challenge or politics versus religion. Ulysses Santa Maria. Santa Maria. Page 235. This is again showing a migration from the Maghreb coming down from like northwestern Africa and even Iberia, if you want to connect that, right? That's a third direction of migration that we see, right? And we can see something here in the middle of the page that in southern Nigeria, the natives called Black Jews, the strange people, or the Imo-Yoquaim, they are called the B'nai Ephraim, the sons of Ephraim. They claim that their ancestors came from Morocco and that this is supported by Godby, who noted that their language is a mixture of Maghrebian Arabic, ancient Hebrew, and local patois. So there's a third migration direction that we got to talk about and understand, and that's coming from North Africa to West Africa, even into southern Nigeria. And this is what these people look like, fam. So they're still there. We're about not demarcating people and whatnot, right? We don't do things like demarcate Europeans from being able to be connected to being Israelites or whatnot, and we definitely don't want to demarcate people of African descent from being such, right? And so it's important to understand how all these things connect, where they connect, who they connect with, and all that type of stuff. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I know Ibri wants to get into it. I just wanted to quickly touch on three directions of migration of people that you can still find on the continent, right? These people are still there with the phenotypes that they have and whatnot. Even though we're talking about phenotype is fluid, you don't get to overwrite people's actual phenotype in history.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to show something when you showed the our beloved Limba elder Cohen Hamadishi and the brother from Mali. Look at how Mali is here, you all. Northwest Africa, right in between Algeria and Mauritania. right to the left of Nigeria. Zimbabwe, where the elder is all the way down towards the bottom of Africa, where Botswana, South Africa, Mozambique are. That's, and considering that this map doesn't really give you the true scale of how big Africa is. Well, in some, look at the Arabian Peninsula. All of this area is where Israel is, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. Look at how nicely this fits in between Mali and Zimbabwe, and it wouldn't even touch still the two in the middle. This just goes to show you how much distance is between the two. And you brought up the second migration. It lets you know just how the people spread out.
Yeah, one last thing that because you brought this to mind and whatnot, talking about the Cohen and whatnot. So the Lemba themselves, right? They have this concept of they're white. They call themselves white men, and you saw what Cohen looked like,
right?
So from like you're saying from Zimbabwe,
bring that up. That's interesting because that's what people try to use against those who were making. Garfield, I think, tried to use that argument.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, brother. I'm listening. Sorry.
No, I'm agreeing with you. And it's funny because they don't understand the cultural context and whatnot, right? Like so at best, what you can say is that the Lemba are saying they look like phenotypically they look like the like the Tawny Moors I showed you, right? But what they're talking about is a cultural concept is that they were the noblemen that came over. They sent their nobles over and whatnot, right? And so they got no issue looking like Cohen, calling themselves white men.
So they weren't saying when Tudor Parford writes that in his book, he's not saying that they're saying they look like white Europeans. He's saying they look like white according to the cultural concept in which they see other black people. So they're not European white as we know it at all.
Right.
But they're black.
Right.
Just in their own cultural concept of how they break down the colors. That right there, man, is that's amazing. But that also gives us too some great information and ammunition in debates and when people try to refute this information, because again, just like when you read the Bible, you have to understand the scripture to get the context from the perspective of the people whom it's originally written to. You have to also understand the culture from the context of the people who are actually from the culture. What's their view of these descriptions? Because again, going back to what I said earlier, we look at the world through the lens of European perspective because that's how we've been socialized. We've been socialized in a racial construct in which the underlying philosophy for how we view the world and relate to people is white supremacy. And I'm not saying this to demonize white people, because white people are just as much a victim of it as they've been a proponent of it, because it's skewed our view of one another as a people, as humanity, in which which is why we're so divided. So this is amazing, man.
Yes, sir. 100%. All praises. I hope I didn't bore y'all with all the reading I did. I hope there was some edification there. You know what I'm saying? If you haven't already, definitely go check out the part 1 of this so you get the full context of this here. Shout out to the panel. Shout out to the chat. Much appreciation for Blacktastic for allowing me to come through. I got to jump off. Ebree, I definitely gave you a few alley-oops that you can grab if you want to. You can run into a whole bunch of papers with that because Dana brings in the Fulani into North Africa, all that type of stuff. You know what I'm saying? So you got a lot to play with if you want to. You know what I'm saying? You can talk about the Ibero-Marusians. You can talk about the Tufians. You can talk about all kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got some. Man, I ain't gonna be too long though. But yeah, I got some. It probably won't take no more than a few minutes.
Yes, sir.
A special treat for you this evening. A young man that you all know is Joe the Policeman from the What's Going Down episode of That's My Mama. I want you to put your hands together and welcome him to the stage. Big round of applause for Jackson Heights' own Mr. Randy.
Hebrew, the Hebrew of Israel.
You hungry yet or no?
Yes. I'm gonna share my screen.
You got it, brother.
And I didn't prepare a presentation, y'all. I kind of just grabbed a few things, but still, y'all will understand the information. I think it will still look good. So this right here is just one example for the origin of haplogroup E. And we're going to mostly talk about the groups that Moore talked about, like the Tuareg and the Amazigh, or the Berbers, and North African and Sahelian populations. So again, one theory is that haplogroup E would have originated in Eastern Africa and would have dispersed all throughout the Middle East and the Mediterranean. And you can see North Africa. So the Berber groups that are in North Africa, they would have entered around 14,000 years ago, migrating from the east to the west, or in some cases 20,000 years ago when it comes to EM78. And now there's another interpretation, though, when it comes to the spread of haplogroup E. And this other interpretation is that it would have came from the Levant in the Middle East. So here's a map just showing you E deep in the Levant. And as you can see, it would have came out of the Levant going into North Africa. Same migration from east to west, also throughout the Middle East and into the Mediterranean, into East Africa, things of that nature. Now, at the end of the day, what's kind of interesting about either the E origin in the Levant. Actually, there's another map I can show you with the migration of E. Let me show you another one. Being in here, here's another one. DE, basal Eurasians coming from the Middle East, going into Africa, and then expanding. And again, you see that a branch of E would have migrated from Eastern Africa into North Africa. Now, this is all kind of interesting because in terms of Afro-Asiatic languages, and of course we know that Berber is an Afro-Asiatic language, this sort of fits the origin point of Afro-Asiatic. So, for instance, some people believe that the Afro-Asiatic homeland would have been in Eastern Africa, and it would have expanded, specifically the Proto-Berber branch would have expanded from Eastern Africa into North Africa. I'm going to show you another map that illustrates this. This has it expanding in northeast Africa near Egypt and the Red Sea. Proto-Afro-Asiatic, Berber going from east to west. This fits perfectly with the E marker. And that's mainly what I want to show y'all is how the movement of the Afro-Asiatic languages fits perfectly with the movement of Proto-Berber. So here's again Proto-Berber, likely having its origin in Eastern Africa and then migrating into North Africa, just like the E markers that these various Amazigh populations carry. But again, like I said, Proto-Afro-Asiatic could also have its homeland in the Levant. You have A right here for Proto-Afro-Asiatic homeland, and then you have B for ancient Egyptian, then you have C for Berber. So the Berbers would have migrated from the Levant into North Africa. So if anybody comes to you saying, oh, E had its origin in East Africa or E had its origin in the Levant, you can just say, yeah. There's linguists that would, or excuse me, geneticists that would say that E has multiple different points of origin. Same goes for Afro-Asiatic. Some people might say, oh, well, Afro-Asiatic, actually, their origin is in the Horn of Africa. And then one person might say, oh, no, it's actually in the Levant. Well, there's linguists that would say it's both places. Either way, whether Proto-Afro-Asiatic or haplogroup E originates in East Africa or in the Levant, still both are extremely connected. I'm just going to show you all this. Most papers that I've read kind of show that Proto-Afro-Asiatic would have basically been founded by E-P2, who is the ancestor of both E1B1A and E1B1B. As a matter of fact, you should be able to see EM2 right there. That's E1B1A. And then you see E-M215, that's E1B1B. So there does seem to be like enough evidence to say that E is Proto-Afro-Asiatic. And so now I'm going to get to the next portion. Oh, well, actually, here's another migration map just showing you Proto-Afro-Asiatic migrating from the Levant into North Africa and East Africa and into the Sahel region. And here's the final map I'll show you. I think this is actually the best one. AA, Proto-Afro-Asiatic. You have your Semitic migrating into Arabia. Cushitic would have also been in Arabia. Cushitic peoples, Omotic peoples, they would have migrated into East Africa over time. Egyptians would have came from the Levant, as well as the Berbers and the Chadic peoples, and they would have spread from North Africa into the Sahel and things of that nature. This is if we're going with the Levant origin. And so now what I want to illustrate is how it's interesting when you look at Afro-Asiatic peoples and languages that most of the time people who are Afro-Asiatic, as y'all can see on the screen, expanding from North Africa to East Africa and to the Middle East, most Afro-Asiatic people fall under Y chromosome haplogroup E. As you can see, E matches perfectly over with Afro-Asiatic folk. And on top of that, if you look at the distribution of Natufian ancestry overlaps perfectly as well with haplogroup E and Afro-Asiatic. And this would make sense because, like we read earlier, or not read, but like we saw earlier, the Natufians, the area where Afro-Asiatic could have originated in the Levant, well, those would have been the Natufian peoples. And so if Natufians are the ancestors of Afro-Asiatic people, then they will be spreading their Y chromosomes, which the Natufians carried haplogroup E, as well as their autosomes. And so that's why we kind of see a perfect overlap with Natufian ancestry, with haplogroup E, and with Afro-Asiatic languages. Now, in terms of Ibero-Maurusians, going into what Moore was saying earlier with the Ibero-Maurusians, what's kind of interesting about that is there's two places where you see the highest amount of Ibero-Maurusian ancestry. And Ibero-Maurusian ancestry is quite high in the Tuareg. You see right here, the Tuareg of Mali, the Tobu Chad, and the Mauritanians. This is everywhere with dark red. High concentration of modern day peoples with high amounts of Ibero-Maurusian DNA. And then over here you see in Morocco with the Amazigh, they also have high amounts in the Sahrawi. They have high amounts of Ibero-Maurusian DNA. And also just looking at the yellow and orange parts, you see Tobu Chad, like I mentioned earlier, the Fulani, the Fulani and Sudanese, Libyan, and the Algerian populations and these types of peoples. But a lot of people, they seem to think, if you talk to people online, they seem to think that Ibero-Maurusian DNA or ancestry, people who have this DNA, is only concentrated in the coastal areas of North Africa. People love to say that online, depending on who you talk to. But really, the highest amount of Ibero-Maurusian DNA is among these peoples like the Tuareg that live in the Sahara. And what's interesting about this is that if you look at indigenous skin tone maps, let me actually show you the source where this comes from, actually. So this, you see down here, the source right there. Well, if you look at, I'm going to go back to the other map because I think it's better. Well, actually, I can just zoom in. So if you look at this map, you see a lot of brown, dark brown peoples in the Sahara. And if you just flip over to this map where you see the highest amount of Ibero-Maurusian DNA, these people with high amounts of Ibero-Maurusian DNA would be dark skinned. And so I just want to tell you all this because a lot of folks, like I said, they think that folks who descend from Ibero-Maurusians or have Ibero-Maurusian DNA are light skinned by default, but that's not true. You can have Ibero-Maurusian DNA and be light skinned, but you can also be dark skinned. And I think we all know from tonight's lecture by Moore that the Tuareg peoples are dark skinned, they are North African, and they definitely have high amounts of Ibero-Maurusian DNA. And I think that's about it, unless y'all have any questions. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of show y'all that the migration of the migration of Berber languages, and the high amounts of Ibero-Mauritian DNA that they have.
Man, this is this has this is amazing. Since Ashley said, break it down for the people in the back. I guess you broke it down, man. And then some, man. I have to watch this again myself, man, several times. This is a keeper. If you all have the ability to download this, so you have it for your collection. I'm here fighting the fly at the same time. I don't know how I got in, but anyway, the kung fu the fly later. I think he was watching the presentation as well. He want to know how he got here. You'll have to jump in on his side. But this is amazing, and man, I'm I don't even know what to say. I mean, I found out I'm a sub-Canadian, American, white, black dude biblically. No, we in sub-Canadian America, right? I mean, if they got sub-Saharan Africa, we should have a sub-Canadian or something. I don't know. But I'm messing around, y'all. I'm being silly. But no, man, the information, it gives me another tool in my toolbox, even when it comes to understanding the scriptures. And this is why, again, and I hope that those listening see there's a connection here. When you think that sometimes history or genetics and things are just boring, look at the nuggets that were dropped here tonight, how it helped you to go back and look at the Bible, the information that Orthodox Moore brought out, the things that Brother Avery is talking about. It actually gives you enough solid information outside of the Bible that shows you that no, the Bible is actually true. And here are the breadcrumbs that take you right back to it. And this is just, like I said, I'm at a loss for words, man.
I think I just earned my PhD just listening to him.
Right. Right, man. So so this is this is it, man. Kendrick called me Mr. White-tastic. See, y'all got jokes.
Oh, I guess
That's it now, man. That's it, man. Over the last couple of weeks on this show, first when we were doing the study and we were talking about Mesopotamia, we learned that all these people at one point in history, ending your name with Indudu was popping. So everybody in the chat now got names that end in Indudu. Shirley Indudu, Aerospike Indudu, Ashley Indudu, Denise Indudu. We all Mesopotamian at one point. Now we find out we white black on top of the formerly all these people named Indudu. So y'all shifted us. We learned it from history. How we into the modern day. Now, don't y'all change y'all names to Indudu. No Kedrick Indudu, no Ezra Ben Khazar Indudu, no Ivri Indudu, no more Indudu. But we out of that now. For this information again, man. Tying history to the Bible, to modern day, all the things we've been learning, man. We just been feasting, man. And this right here is just it's the cherry on top, man. So I commend you, brothers. I thank you, brothers, and all of those that are listening that have endured my corny jokes and cracks, but have gathered all the information in the midst of all that. And man, and of course, my brother Aerospike, I know this is tremendous for him because he's been studying linguistics and connecting a lot of dots with all these various things. So I know y'all gave him a lot more information to also gravitate to and hold on to. And then the links to Brother Moore's interviews with Sister Dana have also been put in the chat. Scroll back up, get those links, go to his channel. If you haven't already subscribed to his channel, go ahead and do that. Also, Brother Ivri, the Hebrew of Israel, he has a YouTube channel. Subscribe to his channel also. And the YAP Gang, my family, man, YAP, man, they educate me and a lot of other people on these things. If y'all haven't looked them up, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to their channel as well. I'm gonna go ahead and put links, to these channels in the chat. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and do that and support our brothers and sisters for the work they've done. And yes, there are some sisters that's also involved. Sister Shari, who's not here with us on tonight, but maybe we'll get her on here one of these days. and y'all can hear her go ahead and let loose with her great information as well. And we had some of the brethren in the chat as well that were supporting, such as Brother James Cassell, who was just part of an awesome debate on last night, and also Brother Sean Harris. And so they'll be here from time to time because, like I said, I don't know it all, but all that I know, I'm willing to share. And what I don't know, I'll go get somebody that does know it. And that's why I got these individuals on the panel, here tonight. And y'all heard this tremendously edifying information, so don't let it fall by the wayside, but, get it, grab it, keep it, and so you have it and go over it. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and bring the show to.
I got one,
Go ahead,
one
brother.
more.
You got something else you want to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, the last thing I'll add is this. Don't let anybody tell y'all that y'all don't have any connection to North Africa or the Sahel or Ibero-Mauritans and things of that nature, because I showed y'all that map. If you don't mind, can you put the map back on the screen really quick?
Yeah, no problem.
I showed y'all this map, and you see the distribution of Ibero-Mauritanian ancestry. African Americans also carry Ibero-Mauritanian ancestry. And I actually want to show y'all one DNA test y'all could take, and I'm going to do a full presentation on this in the future. Y'all gonna have to wait a while, but there's this one DNA. Oops, excuse me. There's this one DNA test that y'all can take. I'm gonna change my screen here in a second. There's another version of me, by the way, Mr. Blacktastic, on the screen. You don't have to pull that one up. But I want to show y'all this test. It's called illustrative DNA, and it's pretty good. It's not expensive. Sharing my screen.
All right, you got another. Let me see. Which one am I? Okay, I see it. I got it.
I want to just show y'all this, and I'll show the rest of my DNA in the coming future. But I just want to show y'all, when it comes to my deep ancestry, that I do carry 13%, 13.4% North African Neolithic farmer, which is basically Ibero-Mauritanian. And I can read some of this to you. So it says early Neolithic farmers from North Africa are distinct from any other reported ancient individuals and possess an enigmatic element retained in modern day Maghrebi populations, indicating long-term genetic continuity in the region. Among ancient populations, early Neolithic North African farmers share affinities with Levantine Natufian hunter-gatherers and pre-pottery Neolithic farmers. And it even gives you a link of the paper. And what this DNA test did was basically compare my DNA to Ibero-Mauritans. So check out illustrative DNA. I think it's like 20 or 30 bucks. And you can actually look into, your ancient genetics. And so yeah, don't let anyone tell you don't have any type of connection to ancient North Africa or any type of connection to Ibero-Mauritans, because you probably do. If I do, I'm pretty sure other African Americans do. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that's going to have this connection. Y'all will likely do as well.
Yeah, shout out to OG Sean Harris in the chat. Don't forget to check out Genesis 49. It's actually Shu's channel as well.
Yeah, Genesis 49ers, man. Jashub, yeah. So, and Jashub likes to read books, so he'll read a whole book for you and things of this sort, man. So these brothers and sisters are putting out some great information, and we benefited tremendously from their time, effort, and study, and so, man, you guys certainly, like I said, y'all blessed me here on tonight, because like I said, I got to watch this presentation again because that information from Sister Dana was heavy, man. And I got to go and watch, I got to watch both of those interviews that you did with her. I don't know how I missed those more, but I'm glad you made us aware of those because now we can all look at them, for sure. And I'm going to definitely be taking a long look at that, man. And so this is awesome information, my brothers. Awesome information. So so before we close, let me go ahead and get ready to close out the show here. Because like I said, these brothers answered all the questions that we had and then some. And like I said, man, Y'all answered all the questions. So everybody who were asking questions and things that you wanted to know, you got all those all those questions answered. And so we are certainly glad about that, my brother Sean. Just shoot. Yeah, but just shoot, yeah. Just shoot gonna be all right. So we pray him through. We gonna keep some great information. So, with all that backing us up, man, well, Willie Earl is down with the YAP Gang, and so he's our resident expert. If he put his stamp of approval on it, I think it's a done deal. So Willie Earl said, "Tell your peoples that Willie Earl said he's down with the YAP Gang, studies DNA, studies history, and still believes the Bible without contradiction. Shalom." So that's straight from Willie Earl. And like we said before, when a man with a pinto green Chevrolet and an afro and a three-piece suit like that tell you something, it's pretty much true. I don't even think it can be doubted, even scientifically. Right. So, with all that being said, beloved, we're not always right and others aren't always wrong. But before we read the last two scriptures, my brothers, did you want to give some statements before we are out of here? I'm going to start with my brother, Arrow Spike. Did you want to say something to the people?
Again, it's like, again, thanks for, having us here. And yes, this is the information that is needed within the communities. It's so vitally needed, for us to give us a better understanding of our history, again, where we come from, and that we can be confident in the things that we believe and that we know, that again, that supports again, that's who we are. So yes, thank you again, brothers, for educating us on this.
My brother Erie, the Hebrew of Israel, man. Did you want to say something, my brother, before we get out of here?
This was a good show. And I can't wait to come back and do another one on this topic. And by the way, I have an upcoming series coming out either at the end of the month or the beginning of the month of May. And this series is going to deal with the Exodus, proving out, when the Exodus took place, the kingdom, the dynasty, the Pharaoh, and also dealing with the conquest of Canaan. And I'm also going to illustrate and show how we are connected to that story via genetics. And I think this would be pretty important to kind of show, us being in that biblical narrative. So be on the lookout for that on my channel. But yeah.
And
Thanks for
awesome.
having
I can't wait to have you back, man. Because like I said, man, you guys, man, I always learn something when I go to your channels, and I learned a lot tonight. Man, I learned a lot tonight. So, last but not least, my brother, the Orthodox Moor, man, go ahead and say something to the people, man, before we
Well,
get out of
first of
here.
all, shout out to my G, Mr. White-tastic. You know what I'm saying? Appreciate you for making space for us to come through.
I shall be walking in my new whiteness this week.
I appreciate you for letting us get in that good trouble. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm always looking for it. Again, I hope we were able to give some information that was worthwhile to the people. And something I definitely want to break down is like there's no need to blackwash history and there's no need to whitewash history. We just need to let the facts speak for themselves. And when you do that, the beautiful pictures start to open up to you. You know what I'm saying? And something I want to break down is a lot of times we see people in the search for trying to find out who they are in terms of being African American, etc., and who they connect to. They end up trying to blackwash certain history they don't need to do so with, right? However, there's people trying to whitewash certain history that need to understand they're doing the same thing, and it should be tolerated on either side or whatnot, right? And we need to understand that again with genetics, we can see where phenotype is fluid. So again, even though these people in North Africa have a different phenotype than what they used to, we can still see that they have genetic connections to the ancient people that they were mixing with and whatnot, right? So we don't need to be running around pointing fingers like you're not this, you're not that, because we don't want people doing that to us and whatnot, right? We need to be breaking down that concept like, you know what, we got the same connections or whatnot, and we don't need to be demarcating each other. But with that, I appreciate you for your time, and I say peace and love.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you, brother. And that was profound because you're absolutely right. And that's a great reminder, to end the show on. So, as usual, these scriptures, these statements, Brother Moore brought up us, just tell the history straight, tell the truth. That's basically what we see here in these scriptures, what they're admonishing us to do. When Yeshua told us in St. John 5:39, search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life, and they are they which testify of me. He's admonishing us to search for the truth. All right. And then stick to the truth. In Acts 17:11 admonishes us about our studentship and our discipline in learning. Now, these Jews were more noble than those in Thessalonica. They received the word with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. So we want to examine the scriptures daily, and we want to take account of the information that we've heard too, because it's going to enhance our understanding of the scriptures. So with all of that said, beloved, that brings us to the end. All right. And again, I pray nothing but the best for the blessed. And truly, you are the blessed of the Most High, the apple of his eye. And he's absolutely crazy about you. And can't no devil in hell stop it. So until the next time,